So coming to the early modern. Let me read a couple of paragraphs first. The early modern period is a historical era that spans from late 15th century to the mid 18th century, roughly covering the period between Renaissance and Enlightenment. I hope you know these terms now in world history in European context. जैसे आपने कभी नोटिस किया है, उसको बोलते तो हम वर्ल्ड हिस्ट्री लेकिन होती है यूरोपियन हिस्ट्री. That is still so Eurocentric understanding of world history. That is why people have started to use no more world history. अब उसको टर्म को लोगों ने रिप्लेस कर दिया with global history because it focuses on interconnections between these different networks. But अब चलो UPSC वहाँ पहुँचना बाकी है. This period is characterized by significant social, cultural, economic, and political changes that transformed Europe and then laid the foundations of modern world. The early modern period was also an era of discovery, which saw a significant expansion in European exploration of the New World. The history of colonization also begins with the arrival of Christopher Columbus in the Caribbean Sea in 1492 and the appearance of Vasco da Gama in the Indian Ocean in 1498. The first event set in motion the processes which led to the conquest of American continent, and the second resulted in the subjugation of various parts of Asia and Africa. Now we know this part very well. अब मुझे एक बताइए, कोलंबस came from which country? Partly true, partly untrue. He was not Spanish, but he was funded by Spanish king. He was from Genoa. Genoa is a small city in Italy. He was Genoan. Italian में था, but उसको स्पेन ने फंड किया था. And Vasco da Gama, Portuguese. Now, this is the list of the discoverers: Bartholomew Diaz, Columbus, Gama, Cabral, Magellan, Francis Drake, Sir Francis. आपने इसका नाम सुना है फ्रांसिस ड्रेक का? कहाँ सुना है? ये पता है? दिस इज द खासियत ऑफ ब्रिटिश पीपल. आई विल समय मिलेगा थोड़ा बताऊंगा आपको मैं. सबसे बड़ा समुद्री चाचा था वो, ग्रेटेस्ट पायरेट ऑफ द सेंचुरी ऑफ दैट टाइम, एंड ही वाज कोऑप्टेड एंड मेड एडमिरल बाय ब्रिटिश रॉयल नेवी का फाउंडेशन का एक मेजर जो है रॉबर्ट ब्लेक एंड फ्रांसिस ड्रेक. बट एनीवे, वी हैव एबल टास्मान, कैप्टन जेम्स कुक एंड कमोडर मैथ्यू पेरी, एंड दे discovered different regions and they came from different countries. अच्छा, यहाँ पे थोड़ा एरर हो गया है. Funded by Spain. For nearly 3 centuries, from circa 1500 onwards, Spain, Portugal, Holland, England and France were the main European nations engaged in colonizing non-European societies. In this phase, Europeans often displayed a sense of superiority and entitlement towards native peoples, and their actions often had devastating consequences for indigenous populations. ये तो बहुत basic introduction हो गया, but I think I will have to pose a question here. This story of discovery happened in 15th, 16th century, right? 15th century primarily. उस समय तक तो हिस्ट्री में क्या होता है ना, यू कैन लुक बैकवर्ड एंड जस्टिफाई और एक्सप्लेन ये क्यों हुआ अच्छे से. कॉजेशन इज एक्सप्लेन, बट यू कांट टॉक अबाउट रिवर्स, ये क्यों नहीं हुआ. उसके बारे में बात करना बहुत मुश्किल जाता है. इफ यू स्टैंड इन 15th century टुडे एंड इफ यू आर आस्क्ड एज एन एक्सपर्ट कि बताओ दुनिया में क्या होगा, यू कुड हैव नेवर इमेजिन्ड यूरोप विल गो अहेड, बिकॉज एट दैट टाइम लुक एट चाइना. चाइना वाज एट द पीक ऑफ इट्स डेवलपमेंट. Even take discovery wala thing only, China had bigger ships than European ships. China had larger amount of money to put into fleets and oceanic voyages, and China did that. We have us samay the famous Chinese admiral Zhuang He. Wang He comes from China, comes to Southeast Asia, crosses Malacca. I'll show in this map only. He comes from here, crosses Malacca, comes here, then goes to Africa also. And this he does even few decades before Columbus. तो ऐसे नहीं कि उनको रास्ते नहीं पता थे. And that is a bigger fleet. एक जहाज के, चाइनीज जहाज के अंदर यूरोप के 4 जहाज आ जाए, इतना बड़ा जहाज. मतलब टेक्नोलॉजिकली भी एडवांस्ड, फाइनेंशियली एडवांस्ड, नेविगेशनली एडवांस्ड, एंड इवन डिस्कवरी ऑफ रीजन वाइज ऑल्सो एडवांस्ड. तो भाई ऐसे क्यों हुआ? that Europe stole the march and went ahead. China lagged behind. It is one of the greatest mysteries of the world. Chinese people, if you read CCTV, देखते हो आप Chinese media CGNT पढ़ते हो? नहीं पढ़ते, ठीक है. It's a good habit to read foreign media. सब कुछ मिल जाता है आजकल. So you will come to know there is a constant refrain in their articles. If we missed the opportunity in 15th century, इस बार नहीं चुकेंगे. एक बार हमने एक मौका खो दिया, हमारे सदियों खराब हो गए. हम पीछे पड़ गए, लूटे गए, मारे गए, कॉलोनाइज हो गए. अब नहीं. अब मतलब to miss an opportunity led to paying such a huge cost. तो ये कॉन्शियसनेस इन चाइनीज मीडिया, चाइनीज पब्लिक नीचे तक पहुंचा हुआ है कि ये मौका हमें नहीं चुकना. उस समय ज़ुआंग यहाँ तक आया था, ये टू गो बैक. रीजन बीइंग चाइना के अंदर जो सुपरस्टिशन थी. दो तीन कारण दिए जाते हैं. एक कारण जो सुपरस्टिशन दैट बियॉन्ड द जिब्राल्टर, वहां पे देयर इज लैंड ऑफ हेल, वहां पे नर्क शुरू होता है, तो क्यों जाए, पीछे आ जाओ, मुड़ जाओ. So such kind of superstition then led them not to go beyond certain point. They had to come back. Secondly, these Chinese large fleets were funded and managed by a group of traders who were a third gender people. And they were a very strong group in the court, Chinese court. In the 16th century, gradually they became sidelined. तो मर्केंटाइल कम्युनिटी का ही पतन हो गया चाइना के अंदर. तो एक्सटर्नल ओरिएंटेशन धीरे धीरे कम हो गए. सो एक्सटर्नल, इंटरनल, रीजन, सोशल, पॉलिटिकल जो कुछ है, somehow China would not go ahead. But Europe went ahead, and Europe went ahead because of China. The major things because of which Europe could modernize, first thing is compass, magnetic compass. Where was it invented? China. Second thing, huge amount of warfare and bloody violence based on cannons and firearms. इसके लिए चाहिए gunpowder. Where was gunpowder invented? China. Third thing, for reformation and for knowledge circulation, you need public sphere emerging due to printing. Printing का इजाद कहाँ पे होता है? China. So paper China, printing China, gunpowder China, magnetic compass China. China had everything. Europe went ahead with that. China stayed. It is called the Great Divergence. तब तक चाइना आगे है, फिर पीछे पड़ गई. इंडिया कहाँ पे? Where is India at that in 15th century? We are great power. We are great power. I am not joking. We have at that time यहाँ पे विजयनगर empire, one of the greatest empires of Deccan and South India. It is Hampi city is the most cosmopolitan city as you can get in history of world at that time. We have many travelers coming to India in 16th century and praising. मतलब इतने वर्णन सुन के आप आज भी पागल हो जाओगे क्या क्या लिखा है. डोमिंगो पायस है, लॉट्स ऑफ अब्दुल रजाक है, मेनी पीपल वेंट नूनीज है, दे रोट निकोलाई कॉन्टी है. Lots of people came and wrote about it. So we have Vijayanagar Empire, and that is also a very strong trading empire. Mangalore city, you know Mangalore in Karnataka, one of the great ports in India. In Gujarat, we have Gujarat Sultanate. महमूद बेगाड़ा, आपने नाम सुना होगा. सुना है? गुजरात सल्तनत का नाम सुना है आपने? हेलो, आप दिल्ली शहर में रह रहे हो. मेरा नाम निखिल है. यू आर प्रिपेयरिंग फॉर यूपीएससी. सुना है? यू नो व्हाट इज द गुजरात कैपिटल? गांधीनगर. उसके पहले क्या थी इन द प्री ब्रिटिश एरा? अहमदाबाद. सो हु इज अहमदाबाद? किसने बनाई? हु इज द फाउंडर ऑफ अहमदाबाद? अहमद शाह. हु इज अहमद शाह? was one of the chief founders of Gujarat Sultanate in 15th century. And in his line of descent, we have Mahmud Begada, and then again Bahadur Shah. UPSC asked question Bahadur Shah this year only 2022 prelims. पढ़ा ही आपने? उसको कैसे मारा? समुद्र से धकेल के नीचे फेंक दिया पानी में. तो ठीक है, we'll see those things. अपनी कहानी में आएंगी. My point is we have some major powers on the western coast who have helped in India's trading network. India has almost monopolized this entire, not only India, the entire Indian Ocean trade. India and the second community is Arabs. Arabs. इस समय इजिप्ट में we have Egyptian मामलुक. मामलुक करके राजा थे वहां पे. तो Arabs and Indians, they have complete monopoly over this ocean trade. They are very prosperous. India is also very prosperous. But we are not that outgoing in a way. to capture the entire world. हमारे तरफ अंदर कुछ problems थे, issues थे, जैसे भी थे, so the march was stolen by the Europeans. That is one thing. Otherwise नहीं होता. अब why could this Portuguese and Spanish people really do that? उसके पीछे की कहानी क्या है? You know the part of the story already, but let me revise that very quickly to put everything in proper perspective. तो स्टोरी ऐसे शुरू होती है. इसका हीरो है ब्लैक पेपर, काली मिर्च, काली मिरी बोलते हैं हमारी भाषा में उसको, काली मिर्च. Now black paper was one major trade commodity in Indian Ocean trade network since ancient time. कितना ancient? But to go to Roman era, not even Roman, go to pre-Roman era, the Greek city-state era. In the Greek city-state era, we have, for example, Hippocrates. You know Hippocrates, पता है आपको? Hippocratic oath लेते हैं डॉक्टर लोग, है ना? He was a physician in Greek city-state era. In the 5th century BCE, मतलब गौतम बुद्ध के समांतर. He has wrote about the medicinal property of black paper which comes from India. Black paper was produced only in India, nowhere else at that time, especially not in the West. And it has already reached in the Greek city-state era, मतलब हमारे यहाँ बुद्ध महाजनपद era में Indian black paper reaches Greek region, and there the Greek physician is talking about its medicinal properties. It was not with a spice; it was primarily used in medicinal properties. We have Aristotle. He talks about black paper in his writing. इवन यहाँ पे आपके pharaohs, ग्रेट pharaohs जिन्होंने इजिप्शियन पिरामिड बनाए हैं, एंड दे बिकम ममी. ममीफिकेशन होता है ना, तो इफ यू ओपन अप ममी, तो ममी के नाक में आपको दिखेगा वहां ब्लैक पेपर होता है. तो इंडियन ब्लैक पेपर वाज यूज्ड इवन फॉर प्रोसेस ऑफ ममीफिकेशन इन 8th century and 7th century BCE. तो जहाँ पे महाजनपद बन रहे हैं उस समय इंडिया ऑलरेडी हैज एस्टेब्लिश्ड ट्रेड नेटवर्क डायरेक्टली इनडायरेक्टली विथ वेस्ट, एंड वी हैव द रिटन एविडेंसेस ऑफ दैट. So black paper was very much in demand, but it was in demand primarily as a medicinal commodity for a variety of medicinal reasons. Come to Roman Empire. वहां तक आते आते its use as a spice becomes popular. Why is black pepper required for spice? Because in Europe people eat lot of meat, and meat का simple तरीका ये होता है कि सर्दियों में बर्फ होता है या ज्यादा घास खाने को नहीं मिलती, तो आपकी जो भेड़ बकरी सूख जाते हैं, उनका वजन घट जाता है. उस समय काटोगे तो आपको कम मांस मिलेगा, तो सर्दी के पहले ही सबको काट दो जब वो मोटे हैं, खाना अच्छा. लेकिन काट के रखोगे कहाँ पे? तो मीट नीड्स टू बी स्टोर्ड प्रॉपरली. फॉर स्टोरेज एंड आफ्टर स्टोरिंग टू कुक इट यू नीड सम मटेरियल जो स्टोरिंग में मदद करे, उसको प्रिजर्वेशन हो, एंड देन आफ्टर कुकिंग उसको टेस्ट भी आए. For preservation purpose and for taste purpose, black paper started to be used in massive amount. That was the main use. So if you come to Roman era, the greatest Roman empire in our story is Augustus, who comes immediately after Julius Caesar. Augustus is contemporary of Jesus Christ, right? He was Roman emperor. Rather, he is the one who converted Roman state into Roman empire, Roman Republic into Roman empire. And he starts sending ships to India annually. Augustus के expeditions annually India आते थे from here to here, because उस समय Egypt had already become part of Roman Empire. और हर साल उसके 20, 30, 40 ships आएंगे और व्यापार करके चले जाएंगे. We have Muziris papyrus in India, which is contemporary to that era. We have got one document from Muziris city in Kerala which tells us what kind of commercial contracts used to take place between Indians and Western people 2000 years ago. So intensive amount of trade primarily for black paper was very common, and whosoever indulged in that trade used to get very rich. Now what were the corridors of that trade? So if you see, एक होता था आपका from here you goes to go to land over here, one corridor of trade. Second used to go from here via ocean, again here via ocean, again like this, second trade corridor. इसके कई सारे वेरिएंट्स भी थे, वो अलग बात है, ऊपर से नीचे से जो कुछ, लेट अस कॉल इट वन ओनली. One is to go from over here, then via over, and then here, and then one was so from Red Sea Persian Gulf, overland from Iran, and again Black Sea. So 3-4 रास्ते हुआ करते थे of export of black paper, or they are part of the Silk Road only later on. But one day what happened? We have the beginning of Islam in 7th century. With the rise of Islam, it arose over here. It arose over here, Makkah and Medina, Hijaz region. At that time, we have Sassanid Empire in Iran and Byzantine in Europe. Both of them are fighting against each other continuously. And in that fighting, both of them got weaker. And in that vacuum, Islam arose. And it spread like wildfire, capturing all region and trade both. Very soon, after Muhammad, we have Muhammad Paigambar, we have 4 Khalifas, Rashidun Caliphate. And after that, we have Umayyad and then Abbasid. So these are the Khalifas who established the power and they capture all this region. All this region. Now, once they come to capture all this region, the Europeans lose on the access to trade with the East directly. And secondly, they also lose access to their holy cities. Like in 1120s, Jerusalem was gone. It was Salatin. You know stories. Salatin was the one who conquered Jerusalem in 1150s. And then gradually we have emergence of Ottoman Empire. Ottomans capture. क्या है? आप कुछ जानते हो कि नहीं जानते हो दुनिया के बारे में? What is the city over here? Let me. यहाँ पे कौन सा शहर है? Let me see online if students have answer to that. I got logged out again. नहीं भाई, इधर से देश है, शहर नहीं है. I'm logging in just a moment. I don't know what is happening with my Zoom today. Just a moment. I lost the ID. अजय को है. आप अपने टाइम पास में करते क्या? गूगल मैप खेलते नहीं हो आप? तो दैट इज माई चाइल्डहुड टाइम पास. गूगल मैप खोल के नक्शा देख, दुनिया का नक्शा देखते रहो. अरे मैं लॉग आउट हो गया हूँ जूम. 4 बार हो गया. आई कुड लॉग इन अगेन बट दिस टाइम आई नॉट एबल टू लॉग इन. बताना एक बार क्या. 834240 है क्या? हाँ, मिल गया मिल गया. क्या था 1? हाँ, नहीं क्या है? हाँ, मिल गया. गॉट इट. ओके, आई एम बैक. सॉरी, आई मिस्ड ऑल द चैट्स वंस अगेन. इस्तांबुल, तरुण, करेक्ट. इस्तांबुल, कॉन्स्टेंटिनोपल. मैं जो बोल रहा हूँ आपको समझ में आ रहा है? आई हैव स्टार्टेड टू हैव सेल्फ डाउट अबाउट माय ओन अंडरस्टैंडिंग नाउ. हाँ, तो सही तो. अरे, नहीं ठीक है. So in 1540s, 1450s rather, Istanbul fell to Ottoman Turks, and after that, people lost all the touch with India, and they. ऐसा नहीं कि ट्रेड खत्म हो गए, ट्रेड कंटिन्यूड विद इंडिया. ट्रेड कंटिन्यूड रादर. नाउ व्हाट हैपेंड is that we have Ottoman Empire over here, and we have various Greek, sorry, Italian city states over here. Italian city states since the 13th century onwards. These city-states came into being and they became very important and powerful due to their strategic location. क्योंकि ये बाद में ट्रेड करते थे ऑटोमन्स. So it is the Ottomans and उसके पहले सारे अरब लोग यहाँ से और यहाँ से. Arabs, Ottomans were not Arabs, but they are Turks. You know difference Arab and Turk? पक्का जानते हो? अरब, टर्क, मंगोल फर्क जानते हो? पढ़ाया है ना क्लास में? हाँ. So Arabs were over here and here, Turks were over here. So Italians came in touch with Turks and Arabs and then they started to act as middleman. तो यहाँ से माल आएगा, यहाँ से इनके पास आएगा, यहाँ से डिस्ट्रीब्यूट होगा सब जगह. So Italians became much richer, much powerful, and rest of Europe got angry कि भाई हमने क्या किया है? Why don't we have the access to this? Why? They started feeling jealous. The second problem that arose is that Arabs were relatively okay. They were traders, they were merchants, they were going for a win-win situation. Europe did not have much problem with Arabs originally. But there was other problem, that was religious war. Crusades were going on since 10th, 11th, 12th century continuously. With the conquest of Istanbul, crusades got over. Finally, वो 400 साल की हिस्ट्री एकदम वायलेंट जो थी क्रिश्चियन वर्सेस मुस्लिम, वो रुक गई. मतलब क्रूसेड्स रुक गए. But that does not mean the enmity between the two ended. Enmity continued. So Europeans wanted to not only have access to India, they also wanted to ensure ये ट्रेड में हम मुसलमानों को ना रखें, उनको बाईपास करें. We are Christians, we don't like Muslims. That was the basic idea of the trade. So ये दो चीजें थी, and that continued. Now they therefore started to look for alternative, and that kind of change, to look for alternative, led to lots of changes within society. वहीं पे उस कॉन्टेक्स्ट में आपके पास आता है रेनेसा, रिफॉर्मेशन, एटसेट्रा, जो साइंटिफिक रिवोल्यूशन, इमरजेंस ऑफ एब्सोल्यूटिस्ट स्टेट, फॉलो एंड ऑफ फेडरलिज्म, ब्यूरोक्रेसी, ये सब जो हो रहा है इसी कॉन्टेक्स्ट में हो रहा है. ठीक है. दैट इज इन द वर्ल्ड हिस्ट्री स्टोरी, नॉट इन आवर स्टोरी. आवर स्टोरी कम्स बैक टू दिस बेसिक आइडिया ऑफ लुकिंग फॉर द ट्रेड रूट्स, सर्च फॉर अल्टरनेटिव. यूरोपियंस ऑन द वेस्टर्न कोस्ट, यहाँ पे देखोगे आप, एटलीस्ट फुटबॉल तो फॉलो करते हो है ना? अलग अलग क्लब्स कौन से होते हैं? इफ यू नो वेरियस यूरोपियन क्लब्स एंड यू वुड नो यूरोपियन सिटीज आल्सो वेरी इजीली. लाइक जिनोवा की बात, यू नो जिनोवा यहाँ पे है, क्यों? जिनोवा क्लब बड़ा फेमस है फुटबॉल का. नहीं फॉलो करते. मैं आई कम फ्रॉम अ डिफरेंट जनरेशन, आई वांट टू कनेक्ट विथ यू. कैसे करूँ? कुछ तो बताओ कॉमन. हाँ, ऐसा पे देखते क्या हो तो बताओ. तो प्लेटफॉर्म हो गया, नॉलेज स्टूडियो हुआ. सॉरी, अरे नहीं नहीं, बात वो नहीं, ये तो बेसिक चीज है सर, स्कूल में पढ़ा हुआ है. हाँ, तो अरे नहीं नहीं, ठीक है. Come back to this thing. So simple point is that Europe has started modernizing. It is in the early modern era we have come, that the Ottoman has conquered Istanbul. The pathway to east has blocked, and Europeans, because of their trade interest, resource interest, and religious interest, want to bypass the Ottomans and Arabs, and they want to look for alternative routes. वहाँ पे they start discovery. They are willing to go for discovery because of the mental makeup which is changed, जो Renaissance से आता है. They're trying to experiment. They're willing to go and willing to see. They're going to think rationally. All those things. तो वो सोचते कि हम अफ्रीका को काट के नीचे से चले जाएंगे. And in that, lead is taken by two major powers. One is Spain, जो यहाँ पे है, and one is Portugal, जो यहाँ पे. This is Spain, this is Portugal. ये तो जानते हो आप, ठीक. So Spain and Portugal, this is actually called as, this region is called as, correct, Iberian Peninsula. Iberian Peninsula. This is the peninsula which is actually at that time under control of Muslims. It is not a Christian land. There was a Khilafat there, Caliphate there called Cordoba. Since the 8th century, 8th century से लेके 14th century तक, this was entirely a Muslim region. In the 15th century, ultimately, when this Ottoman has conquered Istanbul, उसका reaction इस तरफ आता है, and Muslims are expelled by Christian powers. And they start a brutal policy of Christianization of Iberian Peninsula. रॉयल फरमान्स आते हैं कि अगर आप मुसलमान हो और ज्यू हो, यू हैव टू बिकम क्रिश्चियंस। अगर आपको काट दिए जाएंगे, भगा दिया जाएगा। द एंटायर पेनिनसुला बिकम्स क्रिश्चियन इन अ मैटर ऑफ डिकेड्स विथ ब्रूटल सेपरेशन ऑफ अदर रिलीजन्स। वो एक स्टोरी है, उसी कॉन्टेक्स्ट में ये सब डिस्कवरी शुरू हो जाती है। सो वी हैव स्पेनिश पीपल, ही स्टार्ट्स बंडिंग। उस समय आपका आता है क्रिस्टोफर कोलंबस। कोलंबस इज द वन हु गोज टुवर्ड्स वेस्ट। वो कहता है कि आप ये सब क्या कर रहे हो, लेट मी, हमने पढ़ा है अपनी इतिहास की किताब में कि पृथ्वी गोल है, अर्थ इज राउंड, लेट मी गो टुवर्ड्स इंडिया फ्रॉम दी अदर साइड। सो स्टार्ट्स गोइंग टू इंडिया और पहुंचता है यहाँ पे कहीं जस्ट नियर क्यूबा, एक आइलैंड है कहीं, वहां पहुंचता है कैरेबियन बहामास में। एंड देन ही इज कंफ्यूज्ड, आई रिच्ड हियर इन 1 मंथ, एक महीने में यहाँ पहुंच गया मैं, पृथ्वी इतनी छोटी है क्या? So because they have no idea of these American continents, but then he comes to know that this is something else, but initially did not know. वो है स्टोरी क्रिस्टोफर कोलंबस की। So Columbus comes back, and once he comes back, everybody starts celebrating कि भाई we have found a new land, and then begins the story of colonization of American continent. Very soon, huge amount of South America and Central America also is conquered by Spain. वो अलग स्टोरी है। So in the 16th century, two major powers emerged. One is Spain, other is Portuguese. But in our history of India, we don't talk about Spain because Spanish people never came to India. Who came to India? Portuguese. तो Portuguese कहाँ से निकलते? यहाँ से निकलते। अब Portuguese की कहानी is going on parallelly with Spanish story. Portuguese also want to do something. Now they can't get the fame of re-Christianizing entire peninsula. वो तो Spain ने कर दिया. They ousted Muslims and created entire Christian land. So they become glorious in entire Catholic domain. स्पेन का राजा मतलब बढ़िया। पोर्तुगीज बोलते हम ऐसे क्या करके दिखा था कि हमें भी इतनी प्रशंसा मिले। What do we do that we become so powerful and so glorious once again? So let us do something anti-Muslim. What is that? So we'll try to cut their trade. So that way we'll have एक तीर दो पंछी. We'll also get economic benefit and we'll also get religious merit in Christian domain. So they start becoming pirates and start cutting in the trade of Arabs one by one. And in that process, उनका agenda एक ही है कि Arab as a middleman should be removed from the trade. How do we do that? Finding out alternative route to India, like Spain is doing. So they have one prince there. His name is Henry the Navigator. Prince Henry है, बेचारा could never become the king because he was very down in the line of succession. But because being he was a prince, he had huge estate and palace and mansion and whatnot. पैसे बहुत थे, राजा नहीं बन पाए. But he was very stipulation. उसने क्या किया है, उसने पूरी जिंदगी एंटायर लाइफ कौड़ी कौड़ी इकट्ठा करके उसने पूरे फंड किए एक्सप्लोरेशन डेवलपमेंट ऑफ शिपिंग टेक्नोलॉजी, ताकि देखो रास्ता निकलो। व्हाई? बिकॉज ही वाज आल्सो हार्डकोर क्रिश्चियन एंड ही वांटेड टू हैव मेरिट इन क्रिश्चियन वर्ल्ड। ही हैड हर्ड a story of a king called John Prester or Prester John. ऐसा एक मिथिकल राजा था Prester John. This was a story in entire Europe at that time. Far in the east, somewhere in India, there is a Christian kingdom under the king named Prester John. And that kingdom is very powerful. उसके साथ अगर हाथ में हाथ मिलाए, उस तरफ से वो, इस तरफ से हम, बीच में तुर्कों को दबोच देंगे। और the other version of story was that he is under stress due to Muslim attack. He is a Catholic king. He is asking for help. We need to go and help. ऐसे कोई राजा था ही नहीं. There was no Christian empire anywhere in Asia or Africa at that time, but it was a very strong myth in Europe. And the funding that Henry the Navigator gave, entire lifetime he gave for finding out route to India, was because he wanted to reach out to Prester John. How did narrative came in the first place? It goes back to 12th century. There was one father who wrote a book about it. That is what we know. But even in that, he tries to connect. आपने बाइबल पढ़ी है? In Bible, in the New Testament, a story of Jesus Christ. जब क्राइस्ट का जन्म होता है, when Jesus is born, उस समय Jesus of Nazareth and भारत, उसमें आसमान में 3 तारे आते हैं और उनको नमस्कार करने के लिए, गिफ्ट करने के लिए पूर्व से 3 राजा आते हैं, 3 मैगीज बोलते हैं। तो 3 मैगीज कम टू मीट द क्राइस्ट, young person, छोटा बच्चा। और those are the 3 Christian kings in the East since the biblical time. तो ऐसे कहा था प्रेस्टर जॉन इज उनका वंशज है। ये उसका कहानी है। Three magas could never be proven. Prester John was never there. That's a different story, but that myth was strongly there. We have Henry the Navigator trying to fund the explorations towards India to find an alternative route so that he can help Prester John. So why I am telling this story is for you to understand that in the initial phase of colonization, economic motive to hai hi, black paper and everything else. There is also equally strong religious motive. You cannot say that one is more important than the other. Both of them are equally important. Samjho. So in his lifetime, he starts sending the ship, but the ships come somewhere here, only this far. They couldn't go further than this. Once he is dead, by 1460s he is dead. Then we have in 1480s next person, Bartholomew Diaz. He is given in the list to you. So Bartholomew Diaz is the one who is able to reach the southern point. He comes from here till here, and he is the one who finds Cape of Good Hope. You know, it was not called Cape of Good Hope at that time. So let me ask you a geography question. Geography अपनी पढ़ी हुई है. चलो, let me verify that. Which two currents come over here and meet? Correct. कौन सा cold है, कौन सा warm current? Are you sure? ये बेंगुल है कि ये बेंगुल है? Yes. So this is B. This is Agulhas. And where do they meet? Correct. Cape of Good Hope. उसके आसपास यहाँ पे मिलते हैं. So this is a very difficult region for navigation. A warm current and cold current come together and they mix. That creates mist, that creates storms all the time. It is not that easy. So Cape of Good Hope was not Cape of Good Hope. When Bartholomew Diaz reached there, he found it difficult to stay there. उसका जहाज कहीं यहाँ वहाँ घूम गया था बहुत दिनों के लिए, एक महीना पानी में रह गया वो. Ultimately उसने उसका नाम रखा Cape Storm. It is much afterwards when John II राजा आता है, वो कहते हैं भाई we have found a way to the east. This is a point of good omen that is called Cape of Good Hope. But its original name given by Bartholomew Diaz was Cape Storm because of this issue. Which is the southernmost point in African continent? People think it is Cape of Good Hope. It is not. It is Cape Agulhas. यहाँ पे Cape Agulhas है और यहाँ पे Cape of Good Hope है. ठीक है. But anyway, so Bartholomew Diaz was able to reach over here, but he couldn't go any further. He comes back to Portugal. But in his crew, he has many people who help in the next expedition, and that expedition is of Vasco da Gama. अब आती है कहानी Vasco da Gama. Vasco da Gama, how many times he came to India? Correct. Where did he die? In India only. He died in Cochin, he was buried in Goa, and then his dead body was shifted to Portugal after a few decades. He came to India third times, but हम कहानी सुन रहे हैं उसके first time. ठीक है. So when he came to India for the first time, story बड़ी भयानक है. I'll be very honest. But even before that, before he came to India, there was meeting between Spain and Portugal now. But this is too much. You have gone over here, we have gone over here. So what to do? Who will get more region? So we have a treaty in 1492. A treaty, not treaty, rather a papal bull. उस समय का पोप जो है, पोप is a Spanish pope. So if he is a Spanish pope, भले ही पोप क्यों ना हो, वो Spanish तो है. So he gives a papal bull which favors the Spanish people, and he says कि यहाँ से क्लाइंट चलेगी a few hundred leagues west of Cape Verde, and on the other side this will be Spanish domain and this will be Portuguese domain. मतलब कहीं किसी ने कुछ कॉन्कर किया ही नहीं है, उसने दुनिया बांट दी, ये तेरा इलाका तेरा इलाका. This is the absurdity of high level, and that is the racial arrogance of Europeans. Very next year they meet again because Portuguese people are not happy with this verdict. So we have a treaty of Tordesillas. मैंने उसका फोटो भी रखा है. They redraw the line by shifting it little bit westwards like this, because of which some part of this region becomes accessible to Portuguese. तो यहाँ पे आज भी आप जाओगे तो ब्राजील इज द ओनली कंट्री विच स्पीक्स पोर्टुगीज एंड ऑल अदर कंट्री स्पीक्स स्पेनिश, तो वो अलग कॉन्टेक्स्ट है. बट एनी वे स्पेनिश पीपल रिमेन टू द वेस्ट ऑफ द लाइन एंड पोर्टुगीज रिमेन टू द ईस्ट ऑफ द लाइन, तो इंडिया आना शुरू हो गया. एंड वन फर्स्ट पर्सन वॉज वास्को द गामा. नाउ हैव यू रेड हिज स्टोरी हाउ ही केम टू इंडिया, व्हाट डिड ही डू आफ्टर कमिंग टू इंडिया? कहानी पढ़ी है आपने? ही डिड नॉट कम टू इंडिया डायरेक्टली, he came to India by a roundabout route. Correct. So he came over here and then he came to India. So this is the region. यहाँ पे केनिया, टांजानिया, मोजाम्बिक etc. countries. So first of all he went there, East Africa. It is called a Swahili coast because Swahili is the language that is spoken in this region. And all these people on the Swahili coast had big city-states, very rich, very prosperous, and they were already Islamicized because of influence of Arabs. So they were Africans, but they were Muslims. And they had many cities. I have even photo given to you here. Somewhere only photo दिया हुआ है आपको. Yes. So you have this Mombasa, Malindi, etc. These are the very major cities. So first of all, Vasco da Gama went to Mombasa and Malindi. He stayed there. He found many Indians, Brahmins and Jains and whatnot. And one of them was a person called Abdul Majid. Some books say he was a Nair from Kerala. Some books he was Gujarati. Some say he was Arab. We don't know. He could be Arab, he could be Gujarati. But it was Abdul Majid Nair or Abdul Majid Gujarati is the one who helped Vasco da Gama to come from Africa to India. उसके साथ वो इंडिया आता है. अब the term that is used by Europeans for his coming to India, reaching to India, is discovery of India. And I find that again as a very racial and arrogant. क्या डिस्कवरी, हम खुद को जानते नहीं थे, हम जानते थे. अफ्रीका में पता है, lots of Indians used to go there. 15th century was the peak of Indian Ocean trade network. As I said, Mangalore, Vijayanagar Empire, Sultanate of Gujarat, Diu was very important port there. All of these people used to go there, hundreds and hundreds. और you know एक रिसर्च ऐसे भी हुआ है कि lots of cattle in Africa has the genetic origin in Indian zebu cattle. So cross breeding of even cattle was done to that level. Chawal, huge amount of rice was exported by India to Africa. So Indian Ocean Trade Network pre-existed. Nothing was discovered. Europeans का अंधकार उनके दिमाग में थोड़ा कम हो गया, इतना ही हुआ. But we call it that India was discovered. And Vasco da Gama came to India. But anyway, let us accept that he came to India. He came to India. He was carrying 4 ships. इंडिया आता है. इंडिया आके वो कहाँ पे लैंड होता है? He lands at a place called, यहाँ पे लिखा है मैंने, कप्पकडावू. कप्पकडावू, और टुडे we call it कप्पड़. Today it is called कप्पड़. It is just a few kilometers north of Calicut. Okay, let me, आपका geography थोड़ा सा, I got to know, you need some help there. So let me tell you this some important names of geography जो बार बार नाम आएंगे. One is Calicut. Today we call it as Kozhikode. Then we have Kannur. It is called as Kannur. समझो इन नाम को अलग से, भूलना मत इनको. Then we have Cochin. South of it, Cochin is called as. आज कुछ नाम क्या है? कोची, KOCHI. साउथ ऑफ इट वी हैव क्विलोन, QUILON. क्विलोन को आज क्या बोलते हैं? कोल्लम. What is the capital of Kerala? Trivandrum was his old name. Today we call it Thiruvananthapuram. Where is it? Is it south of Calicut or north of Calicut? Hmm? ऐसे मत करो यार. Yes, even southern of यहाँ पे होती है. Correct. Even to the south of Quilon or Kollam, it is Thiruvananthapuram. ठीक है. So अपने स्टोरी में we have three important places. That is Kannur, Kozhikode and Kochi. और कन्ननूर, Calicut and Kochi. ठीक है. इनको समझो. कौन? Look at this map very closely. Calicut is in between. Kannur is in north and Cochin is to the south. अब होता क्या है? हाँ, Vasco da Gama comes to India. He lands at a place called Kappad because on that day local king is not available. वो कहीं चला गया है बाहर. And before meeting a local king, you can't start business in their land. Local king is called as, correct, Zamorin. Zamorin. But Zamorin is not the name; it's the title. It is nothing but Anglicization or Europeanization of other term, that is Samudri, Samuthiri, Zamudiri, and Zamorin. So it means Samudri. Samudri has become Zamorin. तो समुद्र का राजा. ठीक है. And he was the king. What was his actual name? We don't know. उसका नाम हमें नहीं पता. But उसको Zamorin बोलते हैं. So there is not one Zamorin, there are many Zamorins. उसका बेटा भी Zamorin होगा, उसका भी बेटा Zamorin ही होगा. But we don't know their real names, unfortunately. So next day what happened? Vasco da Gama waited for one day. Next day he got a message कि आओ राजा ने बुलाया मिलने के लिए. Come to meet. And while en route from Kappad to Kozhikode, बीच में कोई मंदिर आता है. तो वास्तव में मंदिर में जाके पूजा करता है. Because he is under the impression कि this is all Pastor John Christian region. ये कोई लोकल चैपल है और ये सारे क्रिश्चियन का एक सेक्ट है. वो सबको क्रिश्चियन, उसको पता ही नहीं हिंदुइज्म क्या होता है. He has no idea. He is assuming that everything is Christian. It's a new sect of Christian. तो कोई भस्म लेके पूरा लगाता है, लगता है मेरे यहाँ मिट्टी सब कुछ कर देता है वो. Then he reaches Calicut. After reaching Calicut, he meets the king. वो राजा को अपने भेंट वस्तु देता है, गिफ्ट that you bring. One of the gift is wash basin. वो लेके आया है वॉश बेसिन गिफ्ट करने के लिए. ठीक है. एंड देन कुछ फल है, कुछ तेल है. एनीवे, Zamorin says, okay, you have brought such gifts. Maybe you are not from such a rich region. आपका कोई राजा गरीब लगता है. So whatever you think, it is fine. What have you come here for? He says, I have come here for trading. So Zamorin is very happy. He says, I am pro trade. I will ensure complete ease of doing business for you. Whatever support you need, I will give it to you. Please go and have a trade. Sell your goods. Buy our goods. Please go. Become rich. It is a welcoming place. Calicut actually is not a very great port, but it was a good business-friendly environment that ensured the success of Calicut in 15th century. By the end of 15th century and 16th century में आते आते Calicut will be doomed and Cochin will come up. Cochin was already a good geographic port, but anyway, so Calicut में जाता है वो. अब वहां पे जैसे जाता है ट्रेड करने के लिए, he sees some Arabs. उसके मन में गुस्सा. Reconquista of Spanish Iberian Peninsula and crusades of hundreds of years. So Christian Muslim struggle are going on. Market. Arabs also are very afraid that now he has come from faraway land. One more person is added to the competition. I can't allow competition. We have to stop them. So Arabs try to do some problem. They tell all their agents and middlemen, don't help these Europeans. And Vasco da Gama is not able to sell any commodity and not able to buy anything for a couple of days. He gets frustrated. He goes back to the king. आप बोलते ease of doing business. कहाँ पे ease of doing business? Everybody is boycotting me because of these Arab people. So Zamorin sends some men with him to ensure कि ऐसे नहीं होगा. हाँ. So ultimately he stays there for 3 months. He sells all the commodities. He fills his ships with all the masalas he wants. And then before going, he sends a message to Zamorin कि 3 महीने हो गए. Now the month of August has come. I want to leave. And if you want to send some letter, please do. My king also. I have kept some extra material I had purchased on the store in the storage here. अगर कुछ लोग यहाँ पे रहेंगे तो आप आपका लेटर भी भेज दो, आप आपके दूध भी भेज दो. Send your people. इन एक्सचेंज माई पीपल विल स्टे हियर, ताकि हॉस्टेज रहेंगे तो आपको चिंता की जरूरत नहीं, आपके लोग जिंदा वापस आएंगे, एंड आई एम गोइंग। तो उस समय जामोरिन कम्स टू नो फ्रॉम हिज स्टाफ कि भाई वास्को द गामा झूठ बोल रहा है, वास्को द गामा हैज नॉट गिवन एनी टैक्स, ही हैज नॉट पेड एनी पोर्ट ड्यूटी, ये तो चोर निकला, तो कैसे करें? तो जामोरिन बोलते हैं रुक मैं वहां पे आ रहा हूँ। So Zamorin starts to leave from Calicut to meet Vasco da Gama in some place north of here, hardly a few kilometers. Vasco da Gama comes to know. What does he do? He goes into ocean. थोड़ा समुद्र के अंदर जगह रुक जाता है वो। And और फिर वहां से जाते जाते वो कुछ इंडियंस को पकड़ ले जाता है. So he kidnaps 30-40 Indian businessmen on his ship and goes into ocean and waits there for Zamorin. Zamorin comes on the coast. He can't go inside because he is not that well. He doesn't have that quality good ships. जामोरिन रहते हैं कोस्ट पे. तो सी आई शुड नॉट टेल यू ऑल द स्टोरीज बाय द वे. ठीक है, आज एक पहला दिन स्टोरी बता रहा हूँ, कल से स्टोरियां नहीं बताऊंगा ज्यादा. ठीक, तो फिर क्लास एक साल चलेगा ना. तो बिकॉज आई वांट टू टॉक अबाउट सम बेसिक थिंग्स हियर, आई विल कम टू द पॉइंट वेरी सून. सो वास्को द गामा सेंड्स अ मैसेज फ्रॉम द शिप टू द कोस्ट दैट you allow my remaining mal to be shipped to me. In exchange of that, I will release your people. जामोरिन बोलते हैं ठीक है भाई, ले ले, I want trade only. And then Vasco Gama says, send me a letter for my king also. Someone writes a very good letter for king of Portuguese. आपके लोग आए, बड़ा अच्छा लगा. They are very friendly. I met Vasco da Gama. He is a very good person. Please keep. हमारे पास ये मसाले है, ये तेल है. Next time you come, bring lot of सोना चांदी. We'll do more trade. We'll become prosperous. We are always welcoming of foreign traders. ऐसे लेटर लिख के देता है वास्को द गामा को. वास्को द गामा को पूरा माल भी पहुंचा देता है. In exchange of that, वास्को द गामा leaves some people but not all. कुछ उसने 18-20 लोग पकड़े हुए हैं, उसमें 6 लोग वो छोड़ता ही नहीं, उनको लेके चला जाता है वो. He runs up. That's all. तो ये उसकी पहली ट्रिप थी वास्को द गामा की. आया, चोर करके चला गया. बट व्हेन ही गोज बैक, दो दिक्कतें होती है. ही इज गोइंग बैक इन द मंथ ऑफ अगस्त, नॉट इन डिसम्बर. द मानसून रिवर्सल इज नॉट येट टेकन प्लेस. He is ideally supposed to stay for 4-5 months extra and then go so that he can go with ease. Wind is not reversed. लेकिन उसको भाग के जाना पड़ा क्योंकि उसको चोरी करनी थी टैक्स की. तो he from Africa to India, he had taken 25 days or 20-30 days to reach. But while going from India to Africa, instead of 4 weeks, he takes 4 months. 4 महीने समुद्र में जा रहा है धीरे धीरे पहुंच. 4 months. It became a very arduous journey for him. So much so that 2/3 of his crew dies on board. Why? Because of scurvy. Scurvy आजकल हमें होती नहीं है, विटामिन सी डिफिशियंसी. But at that time in 15th 16th century, people did not know what is vitamin C. So it was a very normal reason for diseasing of people on ship. लोग आधे लोग ऐसे ही मर जाते थे, स्कर्वी से मर जाते थे, क्योंकि 3-3 महीना 2-2 महीना समुद्र में खड़े हो, विटामिन सी कहाँ से मिलेगा आपको? It was a very common reason of death. It is in 17th-18th century people found अच्छा स्कर्वी नाम की कोई चीज होती है, because of vitamin C, तो नींबू का पानी पियेंगे तो नहीं होगा. So 2/3 of the crew of Vasco da Gama died en route, but he went back. He reached Portugal and he was able to earn 60 times the profit, 60, on whatever he purchased, and that became a huge thing. And he was राजा ने उसको बुलाया दरबार में. Huge celebrations were there. That was his first visit, and he was celebrated for what? Not only for discovering alternative route to India to bypass the Arab Muslims, but also to demonstrate that its route is financially viable. 60 times profit over the cost. Understand that. So Vasco da Gama's credit is not only alternative discovery of route, but ensuring and telling us, proving that it's a financially viable way of going to India and coming back. You can cut out the middleman. You can earn so much profit that even if the route is longer, it will still be profitable. 60 times. Even if 2/3 of people will die, कोई फर्क नहीं पड़ता. It will be profitable. So that was his first visit. Now from that point onwards, we have beginning of something called as Spanish Indian Armada. From 1498 to 1813, almost every year the king starts funding shipping campaign. बड़ी बड़ी फ्लीट, 10 जहाज, 20 जहाज, 25 जहाज, hundreds of people as crew, 500, 700, 1500, 2000 people. Every year, one fleet comes to India. And with every year passing, it becomes more and more violent, more and more aggressive, more and more bloody. So they are known as First Armada, Second Armada, Third Armada, likewise. In the First Armada, we have Vasco da Gama. The Second Armada, we have Cabral, Pedro Cabral. Cabral is the one who comes to India in 1500. But while coming to India, वो रास्ता भटक जाता है बेचारा. So we have Second Armada coming to India. He wants to come to India, but unfortunately, he loses his road midway. So instead of, he starts from here, something happens over here, he loses the road, he instead just वो खोजता है Brazil. So Brazil was discovered by Cabral because he accidentally missed the route while coming to India. He touches there, he finds out कि it's a new continent. He sends the message back home कि भाई देखो नया और एक continent मिल गया, इसको colonize करते हैं. So very next year, Portuguese people start colonizing Brazil also. But from here, he doesn't go back. He comes to, from here, he comes to India only. So we have a different story. That story we shall see tomorrow. I'll tell you stories which are shorter one, which are more useful one, and which will let you remember things. जैसे कि for example, we have this Pedro Cabral, the second expedition which came to India. As I said, Cabral first went to Brazil, accidentally discovered it, and then came to India. After coming to India, there are two things about him which are interesting. Firstly, he tried to force Zamorin that Arabs should not trade here. So the enmity that was there amongst Christians and Muslims in Europe and Middle East, or in our language, West Asia, due to Crusades ki history and reconquest, etc., that enmity was not there in India. But when the Portuguese came, along with them, they brought that hatred and bigotry, and that became a problem for Indians because Indian kings on the coast were open for all. We have been open to trade. दो तीन चीजें थी जो हमारी वैल्यू सिस्टम पूरी अलग थी from the European value system. One of that is never discriminate in trade. बिजनेस करने आया है, बिजनेस करे, कोई दिक्कत नहीं है. Whichever religion you come from, you are Jewish, no problem. You are Parsi, no problem. You are Shia, you are Sunni, you are Christian, no problem. Come and trade. But, and nobody even said no to that. It is the Portuguese who came here for the first time, started to tell that I don't like this. I will force you not to allow Arabs to trade. And they not only said that to Indian kings, they had that policy across Indian Ocean. They fought with Egyptians, they fought with Ottoman Turks, they fought with Gujarat Sultanate, and whenever they used to conquer certain area, वहां से अरबों को पहले भगाओ. That was one thing. Zamorin said, नहीं मानूंगा मैं तुम्हारी बात, तुम्हें आना है बिजनेस करो भाई, क्या दिक्कत है, बाकी कौन कर रहा हूँ, तुम क्या दिला रहा हो. So that was first thing that Cabral tried to force on Zamorin. First thing, when Zamorin didn't listen, Cabral started to bombard the city of Calicut. For 2 continuous days, he is from the ocean, बस बम डाले जा रहा है Calicut पे. Calicut का major part, the coastal part, got destroyed. And then, even then, Zamorin didn't lean. So Cabral ने क्या किया? He went to south of Calicut to Cochin. Cochin had another local king. And Cochin का king जो था, he was technically subservient to Zamorin of Calicut. Technically उसका तो नीचे वाला इंसान था, उसका lower hierarchy पे था, but he was quite independent. He was also jealous. He also wanted to increase his own power. तो उसने कहा कैब्रल को कि भाई ठीक है, तू यहाँ पे आ जा, I will give you आश्रय यहाँ पे. You can do whatever trade you want. I don't bother. So Cabral went there and started to. So Cabral secondly also understand the second point. He learned that he can exploit the differences within Indian kings. एक राजा versus दूसरा राजा. So from the very beginning of Portuguese Empire, you see this kind of playing one king against other king to extract more of concessions has started. So religious bigotry and these things became more and more intense over time. Now Zamorin of Calicut then went to Kochi with his own fleet to attack कि ये नहीं चलेगा, तो कैब्रल बेचारा भाग गया and रातों रात भाग गया. In that he left 30 people behind. उसके 30 लोग पीछे रह गए. That's all that happened in that second expedition. Then comes very next year the third expedition, Vasco da Gama की second one. So first Vasco da Gama, second Pedro Cabral, third again Vasco da Gama. He comes और खूंखार आदमी. Even before reaching India, in the midst of Indian Ocean, rather in the midst of Arabian Sea, उसको एक जगह एक जहाज मिला. That ship was carrying around 400 people who were coming back from Hajj. औरतें थी, बच्चे थे, बूढ़े थे, अमीर थे. And he just surrounded that ship with his own ships. उन लोगों ने कहा, if you want some फिरौती, if you want some ransom, please take it. We have some rich people, but leave us, let us be. उसने, I don't want anything. बस आपको जलाना चाहता हूँ. So mid-ocean, Vasco da Gama burned 400 people alive, just because they were Muslims. Before coming to India in his second expedition, he burned them. He burned the ship. He moved ahead. When he moved ahead, he looked back. तो उसकी आग बुझ गई थी. He went back and again burned the ship. छोटे छोटे औरत बच्चे थे, उनको ऐसे लोगों ने खड़ा किया था. मतलब we have one eyewitness account writing diary on Portuguese side. जिसने लिखा कि वास्को द गामा क्या कर रहा है. वो कहता है कि ऐसे औरतों ने बच्चों को खड़ा किया, इनको तो बचाओ, तरस खाओ. तो सूर्य से गहने निकाल के रखे थे, गहने ले जाओ, जिंदा छोड़. कुछ नहीं लिया उसने, सबको मारा. And then he came to India. Even after coming to India, look at the arrogance. After coming to India, he did not come to Calicut directly. He just stayed a few meters away off the coast in the ocean. And then he sent a message to Zamorin. Zamorin knew that bhai, Cabral went and Vasco da Gama has come back very next year. Zamorin has memory that last year only they had bombarded Calicut so much. Zamorin ने कहा क्या message है? So in that message he had put two conditions. First of all, that again same thing, Arabs should not be able to trade in this region. You should oust all the Arabs. I want complete monopoly. Why monopoly? Because if I have monopoly, I will get things cheaper. I don't want to compete with other people. And that is one important thing I want to tell you. This era, as I said yesterday, is the era of mercantilism. This term you have to understand very well. All these things I'm talking about are the facets of this economic political philosophy, mercantilism. So Vasco da Gama tells to Zamorin that you should not allow Arabs, oust them, I want complete monopoly. So the first point I want to talk about is monopoly. And the second condition he puts is that whatever was lost due to 30 people that were left behind, उनको आपने मार दिया एक साल में, तो मुझे उसका हर जाना चाहिए. I want compensation for that. Zamorin folded his hand and said, भैया, clearly he said कि I cannot oust Arabs. It is open for everybody. India is a land for every religion. And secondly, he said that your Cabral had bombarded my city, my capital, for 2 continuous days. Uska harjana kaun dega? Who will compensate for that? I am not even asking for that. So why do you bother about those 30 people last year? Let us see कि compensate हो गया. Just come and trade. But Vasco da Gama would not allow that. Vasco da Gama ने कहा, I will give you 24 hours. Take a call. And meanwhile, in those 24 hours, he stayed in the ocean. He captured small fishermen and यहाँ वहाँ के कुछ नौकाएं, कुछ local traders. And next day, when 24 hours were done, on the hull of the ship, ताकि को लोग किनारे से देख पाए, खड़ा रह के उसने किसी को काटना शुरू कर दिया. Some people were hanged, किसी के हाथ तोड़ दिए, किसी पैर तोड़ दिए. And then he almost killed 35-36 people like that in a few hours, just waiting for the message from Zamorin to pressurize him. Then he collected all those chopped body parts of those people, put them in a box, and he sent that box to the king with a message. ये बस रैंडम लोग थे जिन्होंने हम पे कैबराल के लोगों को मारा था पिछले साल. वो मेरे हाथ में फिर हश्र देखना मैं क्या करता हूँ. So that was Vasco da Gama. Ultimately, somehow he stayed in the ocean, and Vasco da Gama was given an invitation to Zamorin. Zamorin came under pressure. They had some kind of treaty, and then Vasco da Gama went back. While going back, he formed 3 temporary factories. One in Cochin, which is south of Calicut. one in Calicut itself and one in Kannur, which is north of Calicut. And then he left. In Kannur, he left his uncle. I don't recall his name now. Some Sandro something. Uncle Becky, you take care of everything. I'm going back. My work is done. That uncle kept on pursuing Arab ships. जहां जहां Arab ship मिले पकड़ के मार, पकड़ धरो उसको. यही करता रहा वो 6-7 महीने. And one day he got into storm and he got lost. So Zamorin came to know कि भाई Vasco da Gama has gone back. Uncle is now lost in ocean. My time has come. So now let me take control of situation. So Zamorin starts attacking Cochin again. तो कोचिन का किंग टेक्स सपोर्ट ऑफ लोकल पोर्तुगीज जितने 10-15-20 लोग थे उनके, बट दे गेट इजिली ओवर पावर्ड. सो कोचिन का चीफ एंड पोर्तुगीज पीपल रन अवे ऑन सम आइलैंड कॉल्ड वाइपर आइलैंड एंड दे स्टे देयर फॉर अ फ्यू वीक्स. जामोरिन कुडंट अटैक देम ऑन द आइलैंड. दे स्टे देयर फॉर अ फ्यू वीक्स. तब तक नेक्स्ट आर्माडा आ जाता है अगले साल का पुर्तगाल से. एंड दिस टाइम दैट आर्माडा 1803 इज हेडेड बाय अफोंसो डी अल्बुकर्क. Albuquerque is the same one who will become governor of Goa later, the second governor of Goa. That Albuquerque, this is not the time when he will become governor. उसके पहले एक बार आ चुका है वो. गोवा कॉन्क्वेस्ट के पहले वाली बात है, 7 साल पहले, before Goa was conquered. So he comes here and then he brings more people, more armaments, and then he is able to defeat Zamori. And then with that, ultimately Portuguese are able to subdue the coastal Kerala and are able to control the trade. They are able to create their monopoly. So second point we have to understand is use of violence, or as we call it, armed trade. It was a very important element of European trade in mercantilist era. Violence का इस्तेमाल करना was considered not only normal but necessary to establish and impose monopoly. Now, before going ahead with what happened exactly in India, I want to expand upon this term for a few minutes. What is exactly this mercantilism and why it is relevant to us? Now, understand that Europe in the Middle Ages is said to be a feudal economy, feudal society, feudal polity. In that, you have a king who is not so powerful in different parts of Europe, and there is an entire hierarchy of people below him. There are lords, there are barons, there are dukes, there are duchies and whatnot. So different hierarchy. Many people at multiple level and all of them are kind of autonomous. So king is not that powerful. The two basic essential elements that are required for having centralization of power. One is civilian bureaucracy, because if you have civilian bureaucracy, you can collect taxes, then you have finance. And secondly, the army to impose your will. So ये दो चीजें स्टेट की बहुत जरूरी होती है, civilian bureaucracy and army. The king had nothing. King was dependent on tax collection on these people who used to collect tax locally and send some portion to the king. So king did not have much power, and king also was dependent on these people for army in any war. These people used to have their own lathiyals and own knights and everything. So ये दोनों चीजें नहीं थी तो राजा weak था. The king was a puppet most of the times. The second problem along with that was that there was other authority, that was church, which was a universal church, because Catholic Church is universal church, and there was universal sovereignty of church. Church used to think I don't agree with nation state concept. This is I who is ruling everywhere through the Pope, and the king वगैरह कुछ होता नहीं है, सब जगह मेरा jurisdiction चलता है. So on one side the king's power was curtailed by all these feudal lords because of bureaucracy and army, taxation. On the other side, the church was being overbearing, overpowered. तो राजा को इससे निकलने के लिए रास्ता नहीं था. That was the feudal economy. In that, the economy was very localized. There was more of a trade in terms of barter than money economy. Agriculture was important, serfdom, all those things are there. I will not go into that aspect. What started to change with the era of discovery that we saw yesterday is that these traders and merchants started to go to faraway land and they brought a lot of money. If they start bringing a lot of money, that money has to, some of that portion has to be given as tax. और टैक्स किसको देगा? रूलर को नहीं देगा, वो देगा राजा को. So king suddenly started a new source of finance which can help him to create army, to create bureaucracy and therefore bypass all these feudal lords. That is one important change. And secondly, there was Protestant Reformation. In Reformation, the new Protestant sects were formed, Calvinism, Anglican religion, etc. So even church got splintered and faction created there. So we have the emergence of national churches and national monarchies. So one important transition from the feudal era to early medieval is the emergence of nation state. And in that nation state emerge होता है तब चर्च के पावर्स कर्टेल होते हैं, बिकॉज प्रोटेस्टेंट रिलीजन आती है, रिलीजन्स आते हैं, तो हर देशन का अपना अपना प्रोटेस्टेंटिज्म बनना शुरू होता है. एंड सेकेंडली दिस era of discovery and commercial revolution that happens brings lot of new finance, because of which the king is able to centralize the power in his own hand. He is able to create absolute state, centralized state, bypassing all these things. तो ये कमर्शियल रिवोल्यूशन, डिस्कवरी, एरा ऑफ डिस्कवरी, कंपनी फॉर्मेशन को पीछे से फंड कौन कर रहा है? वो है जिसको राजा ही कर रहा है. बिकॉज ऑफ दैट यू सी किंग्स एंड स्टेट्स आर फंडिंग कि भाई जाओ, आई विल पुट लॉट ऑफ मनी इनटू इट, बिकॉज देयर इज नो अदर सोर्स ऑफ गेटिंग सो मच कैपिटल. लाखों रुपए लगने हैं, 20-20 जहाज जाने हैं, आते समय आधे खत्म हो जाएंगे. इट्स अ ह्यूज रिस्क. नो सिंगल ट्रेडर कैन टेक दैट रिस्क. इट हैज टू हैव सम काइंड ऑफ बिग फाइनेंस. वो राजा देता है. सो यू हैव काइंड ऑफ अलायंस इमर्जिंग बिटवीन किंग एंड मर्चेंट, एंड बोथ ऑफ देम नीड ईच अदर. मर्चेंट को क्या, राजा को जरूरत है, समझ गया मैं. What is the need of merchant? Why would merchant support need king's support? Because he wants monopoly. He wants to go far away land and impose his will. He wants to create army. He wants to have treaties. He wants to create colonies. So for that he need legal sanction. So he also needs king's support. So ये दोनों की मिली भगत होती है, hand in hand. Both of them start emerging. And that kind of political economy, and not only economy, political economy, जहाँ पे economy is used, merchandise and trade is used for empowering king. Therefore, nation's economic policy are determined in that context. That is called as mercantilism. So mercantilism is not only economy, it is economy and politics together, creating national economy. So what are its features? ये तो concept हो गया. Features क्या है इसके? The first thing is it tries to create monopoly capital. Monopoly always, monopoly trade. Why it is so interesting? Because capitalism believes in competition. Even UPSC asked the question about competition commission, right? We don't believe in monopoly, oligopoly. But in the early modern era, when the modern capitalism has not yet emerged, it is mercantilist era. In that, the objective is to create monopolies, because competition brings down prices, increases efficiency. उनको वो नहीं करना, उनको प्रॉफिट चाहिए. Second thing is you have violence. The third element of mercantilism is there is a belief at that time that the amount of trade in the world, amount of wealth in the world is limited and finite and fixed. It doesn't increase beyond a point. So if I want to become profitable, I have to see somebody else losing the money. So ये zero sum game था and not win-win. It is much later in 1776 Adam Smith would come and he would say Wealth of Nations, in which he proved that global trade can benefit both the parties. The wealth is not limited in the world. ये wealth is not limited, it can benefit both the parties. ये capitalism में आता है 18th century के बाद. In 15th century you have mercantilist belief which focuses on zero sum game. So you have to win, and you know how are you winning? That others are making losses. If they are benefiting, मतलब आप नुकसान हो रहा है. ये एक बहुत ही गजब किस्म की सोच थी. ठीक है. So you have that win-lose mentality. And how do you calculate who is winning and who is losing money? That was calculate. उसका पैरामीटर चाहिए आपको. What is the benchmark? What is the parameter? That parameter was precious metal. तो if you have, ideally ये था कि net surplus trade में आपको होना चाहिए. So net balance of trade आपके positive. But even in that balance of trade, the focus was on crude bullion. Positive balance of trade is necessary, but even in that positive balance of trade with respect to silver and gold is necessary. वो देश के बाहर ना जाए. But यहाँ पे आ गई समस्या. Because Indians and Chinese and Southeast Asians do not need anything from West. They need everything from us. Cloth हो, some spices हो. कैसे मिलेगा? How the trade will happen? They have to give us something that we need. हमें क्या चाहिए? सोना चांदी. So भर भर के सोना चांदी यूरोप के पास भी नहीं है. And Europeans don't have that much of silver and gold. From where do they get? They conquer Latin America. When Brazil and all these parts are conquered, there they find huge amount of minerals. Silver की खदानें होती है और फिर वहां से सिल्वर निकालना है. लोकल लेबर को एक्सप्लॉइट करो. लोकल लेबर बगावत करे तो अफ्रीका से भर भर के स्लेव लाओ, उनसे काम कराओ ताकि चांदी बाहर निकले. Then that silver will come to Europe. From Europe it will come to India. And then they will get masala to it. So this is how the global network is emerging. Exploitative network, but ultimately bullion का issue था. Okay, that's why when you say East India Company got a charter, what is charter? It's not that I am forming a private limited company, मुझे ROC के बाद register करूँ. It's not registration of a company. Charter is not company getting registered. Charter is a monopoly charter because of mercantilism. Whenever you see charters are being given by any nation to any company, it indicates it is a monopoly era, it's a mercantile era, it's not capitalism. Okay. So this is the basic idea. There are many more features we'll discuss gradually as we go along, but this is the time we're entering, early modern and not modern. Early modern is mercantilist era. Okay, so now come back to our handout. So once they come to India, they start founding important factories. And what are those factories? So within a few years of the voyage of da Gama, the Portuguese were traveling regularly along this all-sea route between Lisbon and Lisbon was the capital of Portugal. In 1503, Afonso de Albuquerque came to India and made Cochin as Portuguese headquarters. Same thing when he comes to Viper Island. सबकी बात है. So Cochin becomes the first headquarter, not Goa. It is many years afterwards that the headquarters was shifted to Goa. By this time, 1503, Goa is not even conquered yet. Initial aim of Portuguese was to establish the supremacy over spice trade, but after the expedition of Cabral, Portuguese decided to control the entire trade between Asia and Europe. Initially, they came only for black paper. They were to monopolize black paper, but once they're able to subdue a few local rajas very easily, their ambitions were, हम सब control करें. The western coast of India increasingly became the main zone of the Portuguese commercial activities in Asia. A series of factories or Pioterias, trading posts, were established all the way from Khambar in north to Malabar in south. So we'll discuss these coastal factories for a few minutes. But before that, I want to ask you, what do you understand by factory? Factory का मतलब क्या होता है? सुना इंग्लिश फैक्ट्री यहाँ पे थी, डच फैक्ट्री वहां पे थी. What is factory? फैक्ट्री में होता क्या है? Correct. So today a factory indicates it is a place where there is some kind of commercial production, industrial production, manufacturing. That is a connotation of industrial revolution. Before industrial revolution happened, factory was not about production. It was about storage and trading. So factory has three important connotations. The first connotation of factory is that it's a place where there is a warehouse or godown. There is either a warehouse or a godown where you can store and trade. Now, why do you need to store? माल खरीदो बेचो. The Europeans had long-term view. They knew that there is seasonal price fluctuation. So they would want to buy the things when they are cheaper. So they stay here for entire year. They buy the things when they are cheaper in proper season and then they sell them when they are dear in proper season. तो 6 महीना 8 महीने को माल रखना है, कहाँ पे रखेंगे? फैक्ट्री में. Not only that, there is a specific schedule of traveling to India and from India because it is dependent on monsoon. There are no steamboats yet. It's all monsoon. तो सीजन में ही आएंगे जून में एंड चले जाएंगे दिसंबर में. बट व्हेन दे कम इन जून एंड गो बैक इन दिसंबर, उस समय माल महंगा होता है. सो उनको खरीदना एक समय है बट उसको लिस्बन भेजना अकॉर्डिंग टू देयर ओन शेड्यूल ऑफ मानसून है. तो मानसूनल शिफ्टिंग एंड प्राइस शिफ्टिंग आर नॉट इन सिंक. So how to ensure that they get the cheapest price? So they buy it whenever it is cheap and they store for a few months. So storage and trading, ये पहला point है factory का. The second part is that they have, because the people need to stay there for entire year, you have residential quarters. For whom? For the administrators of factory, for traders, for merchants, for soldiers, and even for naval officers. So because it needs some protection also, there are some people with arm. So they also need to stay. तो फैक्ट्री के अंदर ऐसा बड़ा सा कंपाउंड होगा, उसके अंदर गोडाउन्स भी होंगे, कुछ ऑफिसेस होंगे और कुछ घर होंगे. So it's a small town in itself. A few 50, 70, 80, 100, 200 people will live inside the factory. And then that factory would be sometimes, with the permission of a local king, fortified. Why does a factory need fortification? Because if anybody is fortifying a region, उसका मतलब ये है that that person has sovereignty within that fortification. तो वहाँ का जो local कोतवाल होगा, city municipal commissioner होगा, राजा होगा, he would not be able to have his sway because the person will just hide behind fortification. तो आप क्या करो? कुछ नहीं कर सकते. So why would these people want fortification? Because of two reasons. Ostensible reason is that उनके आपस में rivalry है. तो British would say कि फ्रेंचों के खिलाफ हमें security चाहिए, तो let me have fortification. French would say the same thing against British, and both of them will get fortified. That is their ostensible reason. But really, they also want to have protection against Indian governors. कोई भी आता है टैक्स मांगते लूट के चला जाता है, बोले करप्शन करता है. So if to stop against the unreasonable demand, to stop the unreasonable demands of local governors, also they need fortification, and they do that generally with the support, with the express permission of local raja or some quid pro quo. And thereby you come to know generally factories were at strategic location. At the mouth of a river, on some proper port city or coastal city, or such like, and they would have a small couple of ships, etc. for trading. Gradually with that, some navy will also get created. धीरे 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 इनके लोकल ऐसे localized areas बनते गए जहाँ पे उनकी संप्रभुता थी. They had their own sovereignty in that pocket. That is the meaning of factory. Factory is nothing to do with production of anything. It's about collection, distribution, security, safety, strategic location. Okay. So Portuguese started forming various factories. So what are those factories? The famous ones. So we have seen that on the western coast, first of all you have Calicut or 𝐂𝐴𝐭. It was the factory, first factory, but it was never fortified. We know that it is here the Gama came and then all those things happened. The second factory we have is in Kochi, 1503, and that was the first fortified factory. So ये फर्क समझो, first factory and first fortified factory. Generally ये मैंने देखा है this kind of questions being asked in state PCS. वहाँ लोग थोड़ा सा गड़बड़ कर देते हैं. UPSC has not asked this fortified वाला game. UPSC ने आज तक नहीं खेला है. But anyway, we should know that. And then in Cochin itself, we know that in 1523-24, when the Gama had come to India, he died. When he died in India, he was buried in Goa afterwards, and from Goa his body went back to Portugal after a few decades. Then we have two more factories, one in Diu and Daman. Now Diu Daman factory, actually there are two more factories in Malabar coast यहाँ पे दो ऐड करना, एक है आपके कन्ननौर and one is Kollam. So Calicut, Cochin, Kannur and Kollam. These are the four factories. These are the four places we had seen yesterday also, right? यहाँ पे factories उनके बने on Malabar coast. Once you come to Konkan and Gujarat coast, you have Div and Daman. Now Konkan Gujarat coast at that time was being, rather especially Gujarat coast was being ruled by Gujarat Sultanate. The one जिसका एक राजा था अहमद शाह who founded Ahmedabad, right? The one उसका और एक राजा था बहादुर शाह जिसके बारे में UPSC asked a question last year. And the one उसका और एक राजा था महमूद बेगड़ा जिसके बारे में you have couple of paragraphs in medieval NCERT. काफी वियर्ड, उसकी बड़ी मूछें थी वगैरह वगैरह कुछ लिखा है. उसकी मूछें इतनी लंबी थी वो लेके सर पे उसका पगड़ी बना देता था आपने, ऐसे कुछ. Anyway, we have Div and Daman being ruled by Gujarat Sultanate. Gujarat Sultanate was hand in hand at that time with Egyptian Arab traders, Egyptian Mamluks, and also Ottoman Turks. So इनकी एक alliance थी, Gujarat Sultanate, Ottomans and Egyptians, and they used to trade together. और तीनों मुसलमान power. So Portuguese being Catholic Christians and having the history of that Reconquista and also the entire Crusades would get angry at it. So they looked at this as an opportunity to destroy the alliance, oust the Arabs from Indian Ocean trade, and also the economic interest of Portuguese and religious interest went hand in hand. दोनों साथ में चला उनका हमेशा. So we have that thing happening. Gujarat. Div was especially more important. Here there is a Div. It was a very important port city having huge trade connections with Africa. Entire Swahili coast दीव के साथ ट्रेड करता था. द बनिया मर्केंटाइल कम्युनिटी ऑफ दीव, गुजराती बनिया कम्युनिटी वाज वेरी स्ट्रॉन्ग एंड दे वेर डूइंग ट्रेड along with Arabs, और बनिया वेर पार्टनर्स. So you have that, and then you have finally Goa. Goa के बारे में also there is story. Goa lies exactly over here. If you look at the map, political map of that era, you come to know that Goa was in Bijapur territory. आपने medieval India पढ़ा है. You know that at that time there is Vijayanagar Empire. And Vijayanagar के north में पहले Bahmani था. Bahmani got splintered. You have 5, and from 5 you have 3 sultanates emerging. So on the western coast you have Bijapur, and Goa is under Bijapur region. It is not under Vijayanagar region. Vijayanagar, Bijapur are fighting wars all the time. Portuguese know how to utilize such local rivalry. Already they have done that in Cochin and Calicut. Now they expand the model to much greater scale. Cochin and Calicut were local powers. Bijapur and Vijayanagara are great powers. But the same model was applied here, and Portuguese came out with flying success. Kaise? They went to Krishnadevaraya. Krishnadevaraya is the king of Vijayanagara, and they gave him offer कि let us conquer some part of Bijapur, जो आपके दुश्मन वैसे भी है. We'll conquer Goa part, जो आपका part है नहीं, don't worry. But we are not threat to you. You just remain neutral. As against that, we'll ensure continuous horse supply to you. Why? Because we control the oceans. We can get you better horses at cheaper rate continuously. आप बीच में मत पड़ो. Krishnadevar was happy. घोड़े भी मिल रहे, कुछ करना भी नहीं है, दुश्मन भी वीक हो गया. He said okay. So with Krishnadevaraya's ascent or accent, Portuguese were able to defeat some local governor of Bijapur and capture Goa. And Goa later on emerged to be so important. Reason being, actually important Goa है नहीं. Goa का hinterland is not so important for trade relatively. The more important trading regions are this part and Malabar coast. Goa पड़ा बीच में. And that is why from Goa it became easy to administer both the regions. Therefore, Goa became more important as administrative headquarters of Portuguese, not only in India, but in entire Asia. From Cape of Good Hope to China, जितना जितना Portuguese area था, सबका headquarter Goa था. In entire Asia. So Goa was their headquarter of Asian Empire, not only Indian headquarter. समझो, ठीक है? Then you have Bombay. अब Bombay was also at that time under the control of Gujarat. And it was not a great, it was just a few islands. आई थिंक यू नो द स्टोरी, 7 आइलैंड अलग अलग थे, बाद में उनको जोड़ा गया. So it was not a very important region commercially, but it has a good strategic value because it is natural shelter for ships also and against the raiding from the land side also. So Bombay was a crucial area but not yet developed. हुआ ये कि उस समय गुजरात में we have गुजरात का किंग बहादुर शाह. बहादुर शाह came under lot of pressure from rising Mughals. ये बात है कब की? 1820s और 1520s की, 1520 1530s की, 1530s. At that time बहादुर शाह came under pressure from Mughals क्योंकि हुमायूं वहां पे आया था. हुमायूं was trying to conquer Gujarat. So बहादुर शाह wanted some allies, local allies to withstand against Humayun pressure. तो बहादुर शाह ने दुश्मनी छोड़ दी विद पोर्तुगीज. बोला ठीक है, हम लड़ते आए, कोई बात नहीं, अब दोस्त बन जाते हैं. तो पोर्तुगीज ने कहा कुछ दे दो उसके बदले, आई वांट माय पाउंड ऑफ फ्लेश, एंड दैट पाउंड ऑफ फ्लेश वाज मुंबई सिटी. So Mumbai city was given, that was not a city, it was a group of islands, was given by Bahadur Shah to Portuguese as a kind of exchange for enlisting their support against Mughals. After 1 century, सवा सौ साल के बाद लगभग, Portugal was no more an independent country. It came under control of Spain. And Spain की रानी थी Catherine of Braganza, who married somebody in the Royal British family. तो उस समय उसको देना था उसका, क्या बोलते हैं उसको, डाउरी, दहेज. अब don't look at it from patriarchal angle because such kind of marriages are not marriage between man and woman. They are the marriage between the two states. It's actually a treaty alliance between the two states. And lots of things are given and taken. Bombay is one part in that larger picture. But then Bombay came to the hands of British Crown, not East India Company. Much afterwards, British Crown rented it to East India Company. वो आगे वाली बात है. But that is the story of Bombay. Initially, it was under Portuguese control. And then Vasai. Vasai is over here, or Vasai. In the local language, we call it Vasai. Vasai. Same thing, Vasai. So these are the main parts on the western coast. Once you come to eastern coast, you come to know that there are not many places. In the eastern coast, the first thing is Pondicherry. So Pondicherry is much well known for French. Even today we know that French is spoken there and all those things, but initially it was under the control of Portuguese. Portuguese were ousted from there after a few years due to some conflict they had with local ruler. वहां भी उन्होंने वही कोशिश करी. देखो, in Kerala, Cochin versus Calicut. In Goa, Vijayanagar versus Bijapur. In Gujarat, they tried Bahadur Shah and Mughal का conflict. They tried to do the same thing in Pondicherry. After getting Pondicherry with local permission, they started to become powerful. तो वहाँ पे local राजा था जिंजी. जिंजी was a fort there, and the ruler of Jinji was there. They had some family dispute going on कि अगला राजा कौन बनेगा. दो faction थे. तो Portuguese ने कहा I will support one faction against the other, but the faction which Portuguese supported lost in the war, and the opponent came to the throne. उसने कहा मैं बदला लूंगा, निकल जाओ यहाँ से. So they had to leave Pondicherry. So not every time the gamble paid off. ये समझो, हमें वो सक्सेस दिखते हैं, फेलियर दिखते नहीं है. So not every time the gamble paid off, but they kept on trying this. 10 बार कोशिश करो, 5% से तो फायदा ही है अंत में. So you have that thing going on, Pondicherry. Then you have Nagapattinam. So Nagapattinam is to the south of, it's on the same coast in Madras. It was not a very major place for Portuguese. Later on, it was captured by Dutch, and for Dutch, it becomes their local headquarter of trade. Nagapattinam is much more known by Dutch. And then you have Madras also. I put star because generally we consider that Madras, or Chennai as we call it today, was established by British. It was not true. We have Santhome. Santhome is a part of Mylapore today, which is part of Madras or Chennai. We have that Saint Thomas का वहाँ पे ये भी है, chapel भी है या church भी, जैसे भी कहना चाहो. So it was originally a Portuguese settlement. Later on it became British. So my point is, if you look at the southern coast, Tamil Nadu coast, you have Pondicherry, which became known for French, Nagapattinam, which became known for Dutch, and Madras, which became known for British. So on the southern coast, on Tamil Nadu coast, Portuguese had not much foothold. उनका वहाँ पर ज़्यादा power नहीं था. That was not so important also in their calculus. Southern coast, the Tamil Nadu coast became much more important for Dutch and then British, but not for Portuguese. For them, primarily a western coast. Okay. Then you have one place called Hooghly. Hooghly is in Bengal. Now, Hooghly is interesting. It's a river, it's a port also. Hooghly is an interesting thing. Hooghly, as we know today, actually was established by Portuguese. पहले था ही नहीं. Before that, little bit upstream, we have a place called 𝐂𝐬𝐧𝐬𝐿. 𝐂𝐬𝐧𝐬𝐿. 𝐂𝐬𝐧𝐬𝐿 was a very important trading riverine port for hundreds of years during Sultanate era and the early Mughals era. 𝐂𝐬𝐧𝐬𝐿. This is important. जो सवाल यहीं से आते हैं prelims में, समझो. इसीलिए I'm taking so much time to explain all these sites. So you should know the stories behind the sites. It becomes logical. वरना आप डच, ब्रिटिश, फ्रेंच लेके बैठोगे और टेबल्स लेके बैठोगे, रटते रहोगे, कोई मतलब नहीं उसका. If you know some stories, some context, things become logical. ठीक है. So 𝐂𝐬𝐧𝐬𝐿 was important port, but it gradually started silting in 15th, 16th century. So ships found it difficult to go and stand there. तो धीरे धीरे एक नया पोर्ट बनाया पोर्तुगीजों ने ही, होता हुगली. Now I want to tell you something which is not in your books and it is very interesting. हम हमेशा कहते आए हैं कि this Portuguese model was primarily based on the western coast and it was a state-led enterprise. Estado da India, we'll see in some time, was a state-led enterprise. It is true. But there is also a substantial Portuguese presence in Bengal, primarily in 𝐂𝐬𝐧𝐬𝐿, 𝐶𝐳𝐬 and Hooghly, and that presence was not state-led. That was a private affair of private merchants. So we have actually two models of governance or two models of colonization of Portuguese simultaneously in India, one on western coast, one on Bengal coast. The western coast, which is much more important, much more relevant to us, जो हमारा standard model है, जो आपकी किताबों में होता है, that is about the state being preeminent. But if you go to Bengal model, यहाँ पे privateers है, individual leadership है, and जो चाहे वो कर रहा है. Therefore, this became more rapacious also, more extractive. The focus was more on mercantile idea rather than state control. Hooghly became an important place from where the Portuguese started their piracy. It was center of piracy. So Portuguese became much more well known in the eastern India as pirates. वैसे तो पूरे ये भी pirate ही हमने देखा है वैसे, लेकिन ये भी piracy के लिए जाने जाते. In 1630s, मतलब 100 years afterwards, we have a conflict emerging between Portuguese and Mughals. Shaista Khan was mama of Aurangzeb, but Aurangzeb at that time was not even emperor. उसके पिताजी जो थे शाहजहां was the emperor. तो शाहजहां गुस्सा हो गया because of some issues. Issues are not required to us. कोई local conflict थे उनके. तो शाहजहां sent his wife's brother Shaista Khan to Bengal. इनको खत्म करो. Shaista Khan carried a force of 1.5 lakh against Portuguese. उनको वहां से पूरा खदेड़ दिया गया हुगली से. So that conflict became 1638 or 32 maybe. Conflict became very well known and much more discussed at that time. So much so that in the paintings of Badshah Nama, you find couple of great paintings dedicated to that conflict only. कैसे हमने पोर्तुगीज को भगाया. But nobody will tell you that the very next year they came back. And the very next year it is Shahjahan himself who gave them, भाई आओ बसो कोई दिक्कत नहीं, जो कुछ है. But we have a Mughal-Portuguese conflict also, 1630s. I hope this small part is understood, not very difficult. The sites. Let us go to the next part. We have, from the exam viewpoint again, go to study the first three important governors. The first one is Francisco de Almeida. The second one is Afonso de Albuquerque. And then after some gap, we have the third one, Nuno de Cunha. He was not the third one, but in our series he is the third one. Dunodikunda. So we should know these three people, their sequence and their initiatives, who are the founders of the Portuguese Estado da India in the East. So Francisco de Almeida was the first governor of Portuguese in India. He constructed some forts like Azaniva and Vasai and Cochin. So fort construction was started by him. That is first thing. Second thing, he fought against the armies of Sultan of Egypt, Ottoman Turkey, and Sultan of Gujarat, that is Mahmud Begada. So the thing I talked about, Gujarat mein ke alliance thi, he was the one who was leading the Portuguese charge. He lost the battle of Dabul, but he won in the battle of Diu. Diu and Daman was sought by Portuguese for a long time. They started to fight war, they won some war, they lose some war, but it was in 1830s ultimately they got that region, 30s 40s. तब तक वो 30 साल लड़े उसके लिए, तब जाकर उनको कंट्रोल मिला, Diu and Daman. He introduced the blue water policy. What is this blue water policy? This is a very specific idea of Portuguese. Somehow they came to decide that we will not create land-based empire. उनके contemporary कौन है? Spanish है. Spanish have created another model of empire in America. They said we will not follow that. Spanish people have gone inside the Americas and captured the amount of land. Even we have done that in Brazil, Portuguese said, but in India, in Indian Ocean, we will not do that. It is too populous. यहाँ पे बहुत लोग हैं, बहुत लोगों से बात झगड़ा करना पड़ेगा, आसान नहीं है. We don't have enough power. We don't have enough people. We can't go and capture land and defeat armies and create our empire here. We will remain restricted to the coastal area only, in pockets of coastal area. Rather, we should focus on navy, not an army. Army के लिए मुगल जैसे बड़े बड़े लोग यहाँ पे, उनके हम क्या पंगा लेंगे? We can't do that. We should focus on our strength, not on our weakness. And the strength was in the ocean. Mughals were very weak on ocean. So the blue water policy was the policy of strengthening navy and decision not to create land-based empire. And navy करके क्या करेंगे? We want to control the oceanic trade, maritime trade. How do we control that? With the strong navy, with huge amount of firepower with our navy, cannons वगैरह. And thirdly, we'll try to create strategic locations. सब जगह फोर्ट्स बनाएंगे पूरे इंडियन ओशन में, जहां जहां जरूरी है वहां पे, ताकि हमारे को चूक के कोई जहाज आगे ना जाए. विल कंट्रोल एंटायर, हम पूरे इंडियन ओशन को कब्जा कर लेंगे. विल नॉट कैप्चर इंडिया, विल कैप्चर इंडियन ओशन इटसेल्फ. That was their blue water policy. And he is the one who just enunciated it, that they want to dominate the shipping lanes and navigation and not the land. But later governors implemented it. So we have second governor, Afonso de Albuquerque. He was the second governor of the Portuguese in India and is considered as the real founder of Portuguese power in the East. He annexed Goa from Ismail Adil Shah, the Sultan of Bijapur, in 1510. अब देखो ये क्यों इंपॉर्टेंट होता है. यू कम टू नो दैट देयरफॉर इस्माइल आदिल शाह, कृष्णदेवराया एंड अफोंसो डी अल्बुकर्क आर कंटेम्पररी, एंड सो इज बाबर. बाबर स्टार्टेड इन्वेडिंग इंडिया इन 1510s ओनली. पानीपत से 10-15 साल पहले से कोशिश करे जा रहा है वो. ही कम्स इन पार्ट ऑफ अफगानिस्तान, देन पार्ट ऑफ पाकिस्तान, 4-5 उसके वहां पे एक्सपेडिशन हो जाते हैं. ही स्टार्ट मेंशनिंग ऑल दिस थिंग्स ऑलरेडी. ही मेंशंस कृष्णदेवराया आल्सो. Babur Nama Krishnadevaraya is mentioned. So Krishnadevaraya, Babur, Ismail Adil Shah and Francisco de Albuquerque are all contemporary. And so he annexed Goa. Then Albuquerque conquered strategic choke points in the Indian Ocean such as Hormuz, Aden, Zanzibar, Malacca, Colombo, etc. Do you know this? कहाँ कहाँ पे है ये points? जानते हो आप? नक्शा देखा है? चलो let us point out. Where is Goa? यहाँ पे. ठीक. Where is Hormuz? So at the entry of which Gulf? At the entry of which region? Persian Gulf, right? So it is over here. Then where is Aden? Yes, over here. So at the entry of Red Sea, where is Malacca? Over here. So once you control one and then Colombo here. So 1, 2, 3, 4 and then Zanzibar यहाँ पे. Once you control these locations, you are actually choking entire Indian Ocean. जो हम आज भी वही पढ़ते, चाइना क्या कर रहा है, नई बात थोड़ी है कि पुरानी परंपरा 500 साल पुरानी है. Anybody who wants to dominate Indian Ocean, आपको ये करना ही पड़ेगा. Yeah, so this is the policy that was enunciated by Portuguese first, and they tried to do that. They were not completely successful to some extent. They got Hormuz, but they could not get Aden completely. And Ottomans were quite strong enough at that time. So, कोशिश उन्होंने करी थी to capture entire Indian Ocean. Established cordial relationship with Krishnadevaraya of Vijayanagar Empire. We see that horse supply and everything. Encouraged Portuguese to marry Indian women. That also is there because they are little bit racist people. They don't trust Indians very much, that they can be loyal. But if they marry Indian women and if they beget children of that interracial marriage, तो वो लोग अधिक लॉयल रहेंगे, तो उनकी तादाद बढ़ानी है हमें. So in Goa etc. so much so that you see at one point of time they banned sati prohibition. हमें लगता है बहुत प्रोग्रेसिव चीज है सती प्रोहिबिशन, मतलब कितने फेमिनिस्ट होंगे, बिल्कुल नहीं. The purpose was that the widows would be married with Portuguese soldiers and sailors so that they can procreate and create loyal people. That was the whole idea. So we have sati prohibition also. But anyway, then you go Ninoda Kunha, next one. And this is interesting, in the case of Albuquerque, Portuguese follow a strong religious policy. Exactly opposite is the case with Dutch. Dutch are Protestant. They are not so aggressive. Not all Protestant churches are not aggressive. Some of them are like American Baptist, Presbyterian. They are very evangelics. But in case of Dutch were not so evangelical. They did not seek converts. But Portuguese were very aggressive in seeking converts. We will see that policy also later on. But उसके वजह से क्या होता है? Impact of Dutch and Portuguese on India is different. Nino di Kunha, he shifted the Portuguese headquarters from Cochin to Goa in 1530. Henceforth, it became the principal office in Asia, not only in India, I just told you. And he formed new factories at Santhom and Sadgaon and Hubli and Chitgaon, etc. So he is in this era, in 1530s, we see the second phase of Portuguese colonization beginning, that is in eastern part of India. Santhom मतलब कहाँ पे मद्रास में, and Hubli, Sadgaon, Chitgaon is Bengal. The second part I discussed that starts in this region, this era, 1530s may and not before that. Bahadur Shah of Gujarat came to meet him on ship, but in some scuffle he fell off and died. तो दीव का प्रॉब्लम सॉल्व उनका हुआ ही नहीं था. तो एक बार सुलह करने के लिए उन्होंने कहा आप आ जाओ हमारे जहाज पे. तो जहाज में उसको बुला लिया एंड 30 साल की दुश्मनी तो थी ही, तो उसको ऐसे धकेल दिया पानी में. बहादुर शाह गिर गया, मर गया बेचारा, एंड दे गॉट दीव. तो treachery is another name of diplomacy. ठीक है. So what I want to tell you is that Bahadur Shah was facing problems with Humayun. Humayun, Di Kunha and Bahadur Shah are contemporary. They are the next generation, not the old of Krishnadevaraya and Babur and other people. वो अलग generation. ये यहाँ पे कौन है? Di Kunha, Bahadur Shah and Humayun, 1530s. ठीक है. That's the next generation, contemporary people. I hope this part is also clear. Let me see if there is an online comment. No doubt, no query. लोग खुश है सारे. चलो. Then you come to the structure and organization of Portuguese in India. How they, हमने ये देखा अब तक, how they came, how they formed factories, and who are the governors. The next question is, how are they governing exactly? उनका modus operandi क्या है? So first of all, get very basic terms clear. The first term is Carrera the India. It actually means the India run. The literal meaning is India run. It means that year after year they are sending ships and armed flotillas to India. India run चल रहा है. So that has to create that kind of colonies there. India run. The second thing is, since the whole project was initiated by the Portuguese state, the route itself became a crown monopoly. Now, this is an important point for you to understand, and it is different from what will happen with Dutch and English, etc. Portuguese were funding these expeditions, the kings were funding expedition, so whatever was the outcome, profit, that was shared with the people who went as sailors. कुछ परसेंट आप रख लो, कुछ परसेंट हम रख ले. But the knowledge that was created, what is the navigational route? उसके navigational charts are extremely important, and they were the highest protection was given to that intellectual property. For 100 years, these charts were kept secret. कहाँ से रास्ता जाता है, कहाँ पे नदी है, कहाँ पे sand dunes नहीं है, which is a safer route, etc. These charts are the most important IP that was created due to hundreds of years of expedition by Portuguese, and they kept secret. They did not tell it to any other European power. जब 100 साल के बाद by 1580s, 1590s ये charts चोरी हो जाएंगे, किसी युद्ध में कोई आदमी पब्लिश कर देगा, कोई चोरी कर, स्टीलिंग ऑफ आईपी जो चाइना आज करता है वेस्ट में, उसकी बात चल रही है. तो व्हेन सच आईपी वाज स्टोलन एंड मेड पब्लिक इन 1580s 1590s, उसके बाद बनती ईस्ट इंडिया कंपनी एंड डच बीओसी. उसके पहले बन नहीं पाई क्योंकि उनको पता ही नहीं कैसे आए इंडिया. दिस ऑल थिंग वाज अ सीक्रेट नॉलेज created by Portuguese for Portuguese trade. They never made it public, and it was knowledge of the king, crown monopoly. उसके कुछ 10 15 20 लोग, उनके चार्ट्स, जहाज के अंदर भी जो कप्तान होगा सिर्फ उसके पास सीक्रेट लॉगबुक होगी. Nobody is able to touch that logbook, वरना सर कलम कर देंगे, because they should not know how to reach India. If that becomes public knowledge, तो काहे की मोनोपोली. ठीक है. Then the Portuguese commercial enterprise in Asia was conducted by Casa da India, a state organization on behalf of the crown. So it was actually a kind of Sarkari department. So East India Company, Dutch VOC are private companies, but in case of Portuguese, it's a government department. It is not a company. Therefore, यहाँ पे we have not seen the charter being given to anybody. ये खुद राजा ही अपने पैसे से थ्रू द स्टेट डिपार्टमेंट सब कुछ ट्रेड करा रहा है. तो इसीलिए इस्तादो द इंडिया इज क्रिएटेड, विच इज दिस वन, इस्तादो द इंडिया, स्टेट ऑफ इंडिया, Portuguese domains in India, Portuguese empire. It is not privately run like East India Company was running India for a long time. It is from day one an extension of the state. सरकारी सब चल रहा है. ठीक है. As a widely dispersed Portuguese colonial possessions in Asia from China to Timor came to be collectively designated as Estado da India, which functioned under control of the Casa de India. Objectives क्या थे? First of all, to monopolize the trade by displacing Arabs. We have seen that. Secondly, to launch a holy war against Islam, crusades or jihad. Thirdly, create a Portuguese Christian empire in the east by converting people to Christianity. And the fourth is govern Portuguese settlements in the east. These are the express objectives given for Estado da India. ठीक है. Then you come to the Portuguese जो थे ना, आप समझो इसको, they come in 16th century, they are quite backward people. They have the great technology of that era. They have daredevillery. भाई मैं जाऊंगा समुद्र के अंदर, जिंदा लौट के आऊँ पता नहीं. Going across oceans and going across the earth is not an easy job. So they were daring people, but this social attitude was quite conservative, quite backward and quite violent. तो मैं कभी कभी सोचता हूँ ना कि अगर पोर्तुगीज इंडिया जीत लेते ना तो हमारा हश्र क्या होता. तो वैसे कंपैरिजन नहीं करना चाहिए, सारे इक्वली colonial powers are bad only, but even within them you can do some right and left. ठीक. Here's some photo. Now how they governed. By 1511 the Portuguese controlled most of the spice trade from Malabar region, importing 20 lakh kg of spices from India annually, between 1500 30 lakh kg हर साल. That was the volume of trade. However, this dominance came at a steep price. The journey between Portugal and India was a dangerous one, with nearly 30% of vessels never making it back. So 30% people never make it back. And amongst those vessels which made it back, एक चाहे तो ऐसे ही मर जाते थे on ship because of scurvy. They did not know vitamin C का इशू मैंने कल बताया था. So it was a very risky affair. जो आदमी चाहेगा पता नहीं वापस आएगा नहीं आएगा, अगर आएगा तो बहुत हाई रिस्क हाई रिवॉर्ड गेम है ये पूरा. Also Portuguese, so much so कि एक बार वास्को द गामा ने, when he get to know of this kind of numbers, he was dismayed. बोला ऐसे नहीं चलेगा. We need to find a solution to it. So he had asked Zamorin कि we are coming here for black paper. क्या मैं पेपर का पेड़ वहाँ पे लेके चकाऊँ तो हमें यहाँ पे आना ही ना पड़े. तो हमारे ने हंस के उसको बोला, बेटा तुम उसका पेट तो ले जाओगे, हमारी बारिश कैसे ले जाओगे, बारिश तो यहीं पे रहेगी। तो they had to keep coming here all the time. So also Portuguese essentially served as middlemen. Now this is an important point. Portuguese, the nature of Portuguese empire is very different from East India Company that we imagine. So they served essentially as middlemen between growers, traders and consumers. The Portuguese, lacking anything worthy of trade with India, resorted to naval supremacy to maintain a grip on parts of Western India. तो उनका operation exactly कैसे था? Let us see that. They formed a system called Kartas system, or in some books they give the complete format, Kartas Armada Kapila system. Kartas मतलब license और passport और a permit paper. ठीक, उसमें होता था क्या? It's very interesting. First understand, in the to secure this spice trade, we have seen that Portuguese have been resorting to the armed conflict, violence. तो मैंने यहाँ पे फोटो डाला है क्या? फोटो ऊपर था शायद. Yes, this photo, this image. Here you see the blue is Asia and Africa and Europe, and red is your Pacific Ocean. So this part is given to Spain and this part is given to Portuguese by Pope. ठीक है, Pope papal bull में. So these people did one interesting thing. उनकी concept थी monopoly. Monopoly was not only over trade but also over the oceans. We have seen they have formed strategic choke points everywhere. Why? उनकी एम्बिशन शुरू में ये थी कि इस पूरे ओशन में सिर्फ हमारे ही जहाज रहे, किसी के जहाज ना रहे. दे फाउंड इट इज टू ग्रैंड एन एम्बिशन, पॉसिबल ही नहीं, ये बहुत बड़ा ओशन होता है, हम छोटे से देश है. देन दे सेड कि ओके, व्हाट विल डू इज वी विल हैव कंट्रोल ओवर ऑल द शिपिंग लेन्स एंड शिपिंग ट्रेड. एवरीबडी शुड गेट पासपोर्ट फ्रॉम अस, वी शुड अर्न मनी फ्रॉम दैट. सो दीज आर द क्लोज्ड ओशन. दे कॉल इट मारे क्लॉसम इन लैटिन और मेयर क्लॉसम. आई डोंट नो हाउ टू प्रोनाउंस दैट. मेयर क्लॉसम मतलब क्या? क्लोज्ड ओशन. ये हमारा इलाका है, इसके अंदर आना एंड जाना विद आवर परमिशन. सो दे आर प्राइवेटाइजिंग द एंटायर इंडियन ओशन. एंड इट इज नॉट दैट ओनली पोर्टुगीज डिड दैट, एंड फॉर डूइंग दैट दे हैड दिस कार्तास सिस्टम वाज नथिंग बट अ ब्यूरोक्रेटिक सिस्टम टू implement that मेयर क्लॉसम. To go and to come in, you need our permission, and we will use our violence for that. And they had, we cannot, उनके साथ आप बराबरी नहीं कर सकते violence की. They have much better naval ships, they had much better firepower, much better cannon, so they have monopolized the violence. आप क्या कर लो, कोई चारा नहीं. And that was never Indian Ocean culture. इंडियन ओशन में जितने भी राजे महाराजे सदियों से आते गए, अफ्रीका में, इजिप्ट में, ईरान में, इंडिया में, चाइना में, nobody even thought of doing this kind of atrocious behavior. Even today we say the same thing. आज जो चल रहा है अमेरिका चाइना का, इसी के बारे में यूएन क्लॉज की बात करते हैं, फ्रीडम ऑफ शिपिंग, यही तो शुरुआत देखो उस तक यहीं पे हो रही है. तो another power would say when Dutch will come in the next century, they would say the same thing, freedom of shipping. क्यों? These are global commons. पोर्तुगीज कहेंगे ना ना, काहे कि ग्लोबल कॉमर्स तो हमारा इलाका है. देन डच विल रिप्लेस पोर्तुगीज एंड देन डच विल से हमारा इलाका है, कैसे काय को ओपन, कुछ ओपन नहीं है. एट दैट टाइम द ब्रिटिश वुड कम, दे से सब कुछ ओपन होना चाहिए. देन ब्रिटिश विल कैप्चर नेक्स्ट सेंचुरी, दे विल सब क्लोज, हमारा किसी का नहीं है. देन अमेरिकन विल से ओपन होना चाहिए, वुडरो विल्सन एवरीथिंग. देन अमेरिकन नाउ क्लोज एवरीथिंग डाउन, चाइना कहती है ओपन होना चाहिए. यही चल रहा है. तो एवरी टाइम अ न्यू कमर कम्स, ही सेज इट हैज टू बी फेयर, ओपन टू ऑल, एंड द ओल्ड पर्सन सेज it has to be close, ये मेरा इलाका है. न्यूकमर gets established and then he says close, मेरा इलाका है. यही चलता, सदियों से चलते आ रहा है. We see the beginning here. Before this kind of attitude came to India, we had never thought of that. Ocean was always global commons for everybody. But Portuguese did not believe in that. So they had the Cartas system. In order to exercise effective control, Portuguese evolved a notorious Cartas system. It was a license for safe conduct issued by the Portuguese to native ships in exchange for money. Every ship had to purchase a Cartas issued by the authority of Estado da India. आपको कहाँ से भी कहीं जाना है, you have to take a permit, क्योंकि उनका इलाका है, पूरा ओशन उनका इलाका है. And what that system means, there are 4-5 important points. The first point, it mentioned particulars of a ship, details of voyage, and cargo. On that permit license, they will mention ship ka naam, ship ka region, ship ka origin, ship ka details, cargo, people, everything. And these terms should be expressly told, made public, and not to be changed. Second thing, a fee was charged for issuing kartas. So if you want to take kartas, आपको एक लाइसेंस के पैसे देने पड़ेंगे. So that became a source of income. Portuguese खुद कुछ नहीं बना रहे. They are just using their violence to skim off the profit. दूध सब लोग बनाएंगे, मलाई पोर्तुगीज लेके जाएंगे. ये चल रहा है यहाँ. Then it was prohibited from carrying commodities such as spices which were sought by Portuguese. So Portuguese ने कहा था that we will mention all the cargo. In that cargo we have a negative list. You know negative list? पता है आजकल क्या होता है? These are the items which are not allowed to be transported. Why? Because we monopolize them. Paper कोई नहीं, पेपर बस हमारे शिप में जाएगा. ठीक है. So they even introduced negative list and contraband items. Then ships were compelled to ply along specified routes and call on Portuguese ports where they had to pay custom duties. तो आप कहीं से भी कहीं नहीं, अपनी इच्छा नहीं है. If you leave from Malabar, you have to go to Goa. From Goa you have to go to Diu. From Diu you have to go to Hormuz, and from there you can go to Persian Gulf. आपको ये 3-4 पोर्ट पे जाना ही, वरना डुबा देंगे हम. You have to make a call. You have to go pay some custom duty, क्योंकि हमने आपको हमारा समंदर यूज करने दिया. समंदर हमारा है. We are letting you use it. You have to pay custom duty. So then ships plying without a kartas or found contravening its terms were captured. The crew was killed or enslaved while the cargo was confiscated. नहीं करोगे तो आप भी मरोगे, आपका शिप भी डूबेगा, आपके लोग गुलाम बन के उनको बेच देंगे और सामान हम ले लेंगे. So that is how you use violence. And it was actually quite relatively effective for some time, for 100 years, so much so that we have Badshah Jahangir purchasing kartas. Jahangir has mentioned in his diary, I have purchased so many kartas. Jahangir's daughter, Shah Jahan की बहन थी, Jahanara Begum. She also wanted to go to Makkah. So Mughal princess wants to go to Makkah. She is afraid she cannot go by herself. She purchases kartas. So that is the level ki Mughal know that they are the power on the land, but power on the ocean is Portuguese. So, and if the Mughal Badshah is doing it, the Mughal princess is doing it, तो उनकी पूरी हायरार्की जो है, बड़े बड़े मनसबदार, जमींदार, जागीरदार सब कुछ करते होंगे. Everybody wants to go to Hajj. They are also doing lots of trade, investing money in trade. सूरत is a big town emerging. तो वो सब लोग खरीदते होंगे. मतलब पूरा ट्रेड चल रहा है, उस ट्रेड में इनको कुछ ना कुछ फायदा हो रहा है. You do the trade, you pay tax to them. For what? Because they have violence control. And that was the very idea of Portuguese Empire. They did not. अंग्रेजों ने कुछ तो करा था, कुछ तो ट्रेड किया था. They found some new items. They did something. Dutch brought some kind of new innovative mechanisms of finance. Portuguese ने कुछ नहीं. Portuguese का only contribution to trade was organized state banditry and piracy. Nothing else. It is not capitalism. It is not capitalism. So they collapsed very soon. The moment Dutch arrived, Portuguese collapse like house of cards. And then on the eastern coast, we say they are also focusing on piracy. So they use Hooghly as a base for piracy in Bay of Bengal, and their naval superiority into raids, raiding traders and Muslim pilgrims performing Hajj, etc. उनका काम था वो. So the point is, this is all input side. They tried to establish such system. The question is to what extent they were really successful. So they are putting in so much efforts, so much violence. Have they been able to control Indian Ocean completely? Especially when it comes to black paper, which is the main reason of their coming to India. Have they been able to monopolize black paper completely? The answer is 50-50. Answer is 50-50. कुछ हद तक किया, कुछ हद तक नहीं किया. जैसे the Portuguese were unable to meaningfully dominate paper producing areas along the Malabar coast because there is no single. In case of Indonesia, there is one single island which is source of spice. In India, that is not so. Paper is produced in a vastly dispersed region across the state of Kerala. So, आप कहाँ control करोगे? So there was always a scope for piracy of paper by bypassing Portuguese region. It was not easy. So some amount of paper was bypassed. Secondly, though through the 16th century, they tried to concentrate all East African trade to their ports at Malindi in Mozambique, decimating local textile manufacturers. However, the African demand for Gujarati textiles stayed very high. So they are now trying to control कि भाई इंडिया का बाकी एक्सपोर्ट बंद करा देंगे हम, जो जाना हमारे थ्रू जाए. But even then, there was again huge amount of piracy because we were so good at producing some commodities that were much high in demand. How much artificially you try to control that, you can't control it completely. That is the main point. Then parallel routes continued to emerge. For example, although Cape of Good Hope was monopolized by Portuguese, the traditional sea-come land route from West Asia continued to operate like before despite Portuguese efforts to close it down. जो समुद्र से जाता था, केप ऑफ गुड होप तो उनके पास ही, हमें पता भी नहीं कैसे जाता है यूरोप. वी कैनॉट गो टू यूरोप डायरेक्टली, वी डोंट हैव चार्ट्स, वी डोंट हैव आइडिया. वी कैन गो टू अफ्रीका, वी कैन गो टू इजिप्ट, वी कैन गो टू सऊदी अरेबिया. ऑल्दो सऊदी अरेबिया वाज नॉट द अरेबिक रीजन. एंड देन सी कम लैंड जाते तो वो चलता रहा कुछ ना कुछ हद तक. दे हैव होर्मुज, दे डोंट हैव एडन. सो कंट्रोल ओवर होर्मुज gave them control over Persian Gulf, but the Red Sea remained under Ottoman control. And Gujarati Baniya class was innovative all the time. Because you have no control over Goa and western coast, उन्होंने कहा हम western coast पे bypass करेंगे. We'll procure our commodity from Southeast Asia. We'll go to Lakshadweep, and from Lakshadweep we'll go directly Egypt. हम इंडिया का bypass कर देते हैं, कोई दिक्कत ही नहीं है, आप रखो आपका गोवा आपके पास. So the new trade links emerged to bypass Portuguese control. Thereby you see gradually there is some amount of bypassing of the. Nonetheless, the activities of Arabs and Gujarati merchants received some setback for sure. Few Indian ships now could sail to East Africa and Arabia, as well as East and Spice Islands in Indonesia. By the later half of 16th century, मतलब 1700 के लगभग तक, the 75% of paper available in European markets was being supplied by Portuguese, which was primarily sourced from India. So they could go up to 75% of controlling the paper trade. That also for a few years only. उसके बाद it gets collapsed very quickly with the Dutch का emergence. अरे बहुत सारी चीजें इंटरेस्टिंग है. I'll give you an example of Diu, for example. दमन दीव का दीव जो है, Diu was a place where, as I said, with the Sultan of Gujarat, we have the Baniyas of Gujarat and Arabs are doing trade together. When Portuguese captured Diu in 1530s, they are blinded by their hatred towards Muslims. So उनका एजेंडा एकमात्र है, अरबों को भगाओ यहाँ से. The moment they do that, a vacuum is created in trade. डिमांड तो है, ट्रेड करेगा कौन? That vacuum is filled by गुजराती बनियास. तो कई बार history is very complicated. Portuguese capturing Diu helped in the rise of Gujarati baniyas because the Arabs were ousted from the picture. That is only one instance. You have Gujaratis also creating a new institution called Mahajan system. So all the traders of the port city of the gully would come together and form association and choose their leader, Mahajan, guild kind of system, which makes the association very easy for different trades and crafts. Through that, they can act as a collective and bargain as collective, bring efficiency and coordination. So that this emergence of Mahajan system also helped a lot to Gujarati traders को आगे जाने के लिए, and Portuguese were there to suppress them. You have Portuguese वो सब देख रहे थे, एक पॉइंट पे गुस्सा हो गए. उन्होंने कहा no more a Hindu is allowed to trade in Indian Ocean. If you are found on a ship going to Africa, आपको सरकलम कर देंगे. But that was found so difficult to implement because Gujarati Baniyas controlled the entire trade from Southeast Asia to India to West Africa, East Africa. कि वो implement किसी ने किया ही नहीं. So much so कि दीव का गवर्नर खुद था, Portuguese governor, who was given the monopoly of ivory. Ivory trade जो होता है हाथी के दांत, उसके पूरा इंडियन ओशन का मोनोपोली का इसके पास है, तो दीव का Portuguese गवर्नर, उसने खुद ने वो मोनोपोली सीक्रेटली बेच दी टू गुजराती बनियान. भी आप सब करो, मुझे पैसे दे दो, मुझे कट प्रैक्टिस करनी है. सो दैट वाज द होल्ड ऑफ द गुजरातीज ऑन द ट्रेड. आप जितना भी कोशिश करो, आप हिला नहीं सकते. एक बार कुछ और प्रॉब्लम हुआ था, तो पोर्तुगीज लोगों ने पूरा का पूरा अफ्रीकन ट्रेड का जो मोनोपोली है गुजराती महाजन ग्रुप को दे दिया. बोले हम आप ट्रेड करो, यू पे अस मनी एवरी ईयर. एंड दैट गुजराती कम्युनिटी देन पार्टनर्ड विद सम क्रिश्चियंस, पोर्तुगीज क्रिश्चियंस, के आप भी कुछ कर लो उसके साथ साथ. तो दे नो हाउ टू नेविगेट दिस काइंड ऑफ, कैसे करप्शन करना है, किसको पैसे देने हैं, कैसे जो कुछ करना है करके भाई बिजनेस करना है. तो Portuguese could not uproot. They uprooted Arabs to some extent, but Gujarati Banyas could not be uprooted from the trade despite all the efforts. Anyway, we don't need to go into that history much, but we have these stories. The limitations of the Portuguese rule in India, उनके problems क्या थे? After initial success, Portuguese colonies remained stagnant for a long time and then declined. When other European powers emerged on the scene, the Portuguese lost on their gains. क्या हुआ? First is economic reasons. पहले तो simple है, they did not introduce any new commodity, they did not introduce any new technology, they did not introduce any new technique. They just tried to skim off the milk. तो उससे तो limitations होने ही है. There is no improvement in anything. Secondly, Portuguese commerce in Asia was partly sustained by the resources of its empire in Brazil. So, जैसे कि Brazil में they are taking sugar or they are taking this silver, and then that money they are using to fund Indian finance, Indian trade. It has limited. कितनी बार cross subsidization कितना करोगे आप? There is a limit to it, and once the system gets collapsed, it gets collapsed. So it was a very tenuous kind of balance that they had reached. Secondly, Portuguese did not have infrastructure for building a wide distribution network in Europe. ये भी एक अजीब बात थी. Portuguese purchased Indian commodities or ensured that they reached Lisbon. Lisbon के बाद आगे क्या? कुछ नहीं. Neither on Indian side nor on European side they created such networks. European side में Lisbon से माल उठाने कौन आते थे? Dutch, German, and they created big banks and big industries or big trading companies out of that. Like Fugger नाम की company थी that had the monopoly of Central Europe. Lisbon से आके जो कुछ माल मसाले बेचने यूरोप में हम बेचेंगे. तो Portuguese on the European side also did not do any innovative. बस आके वहाँ पे रख दो Lisbon पे, जिसको आने उठाए पैसे दे चले जाए, खत्म. It's not capitalism. By the closing decade of the 16th century, Portuguese were finding it difficult to mobilize sufficient capital for investing in commercial voyages to Asia. Now, commercial voyages are very difficult. As I told you, take 30 ships, 40 ships, half of them don't come alive. People die on. So it's not easy. You need a huge amount of finances, and it is beyond the capacity of any single person to keep financing it year after year after year, despite having profit. ये प्रॉब्लम जो था लिमिटेशन ऑफ कैपिटल का, वो सॉल्व करते हैं अंग्रेज एंड डच. हाउ? नॉट बाय रॉयल फंडिंग, बट बाय क्रिएटिंग स्टॉक मार्केट. द स्टॉक मार्केट एज इनोवेशन केम because Portuguese were finding it difficult to raise capital, and Dutch and British could do that. So world's first stock market is Amsterdam, 1602. Okay. Portuguese could not do that. They just tried to focus on, because it's a sarkari company, it is not agile enough. Maintaining it financially afloat became extremely difficult. In 1580, Philip II of Spain usurped the throne of Portugal, and then Portugal remained under Spanish control till 1640. Now 1580 to 1640 मतलब 60 साल. This is interesting thing. 60 साल Portuguese खुद गुलाम रहा. So country which is not itself independent has colonies in India. Spanish, after controlling Portugal, Spain was not interested in India. Spain को अपना empire था चलाने के लिए. They just captured Portugal and left Portuguese colonies as it is. So यहाँ के जो उनके administrators थे, local governors थे, they became very autonomous. उनका ही सब चलना शुरू हो गया. तो आई समटाइम्स फाइंड इट इंटरेस्टिंग क्या आप गुलामों के गुलाम बन गए इंडिया में हम. ठीक है. ग्रेजुअली पोर्तुगाल बिकेम इंटरेस्टेड इन गोल्ड इन ब्राजील, स्लेव ट्रेड इन अटलांटिक रादर देन पेपर इन इंडिया. सो बाय द 1700 they lost interest in India. They continued to hold Goa till 1961, but it was more as a symbolic rather than actual trading empire. The strategic reasons, ये तो इकोनॉमिक कॉन्टेक्स्ट हो गया. इकोनॉमिकली दे वर नॉट कैपिटलिस्टिक इनफ टू एक्सपांड एंड ग्रो. What is strategic reason? Portuguese antagonized local population and created powerful adversaries in the vicinity. We have seen that the way they operated by bombarding 𝐂𝐿𝐴 the day you come is not the way to do business. अंग्रेज देखो, अंग्रेज इतना अक्लमंद इंसान आता है हाथ जोड़ के, आके पहले आपके पैर चाटेगा. आई एम नॉट जोकिंग. They are so servile, so obedient, and so polite and so humble कि आप भाई इसी के साथ बिजनेस करना है मेरे को. And not only in attitude and behavior, to the next level, they also reflect that in their dealings. आपके तरफ के जो बिजनेस क्लास होगी उनके साथ वो ऐसे करेंगे पार्टनरशिप कि दोनों का फायदा हो. So they will, local traders, merchants also will find it much more beneficial to go on British side than on being with Indian side. तो सारा फाइनेंस में डाइवर्ट हो जाएगा. अंग्रेज एकदम जबान का पक्का, जबान, फाइनेंशियल इंस्ट्रूमेंट, फाइनेंशियल डीलिंग्स, कॉन्ट्रैक्ट सैक्रोसैंक्ट, जान चली जाए कॉन्ट्रैक्ट ना टूटे, जो लिखा है चलेगा. तो आपका ट्रस्ट सदियों तक ट्रस्ट चलता है. इट इज अ ट्रस्ट दैट यू अर्न ओवर सेंचुरीज. इट्स नॉट दैट थिंग. सो इंडियन, फॉर एग्जाम्पल आपको यहाँ पे सेट हो एंड यू हैव मनी टू लेंड, यू हैव वन ऑप्शन, यू कैन लेंड टू सम लोकल जमींदार, पता नहीं कला के तुम्हें मार दे वो, एंड यू कैन लेंड टू ब्रिटिश, पक्का आएगा विथ 2% एक्स्ट्रा इंटरेस्ट, पक्का वापस मिलेगा, गारंटी है मुझे, भले वो पावरफुल हो या ना हो. So that is the amount of financial trust that they create. And they learned how to grease the palms of entire bureaucracy, top to bottom. उन्होंने हमें गालियां दी अंग्रेजों ने कि ये करप्ट लोग हैं, करप्ट. उन्होंने इतना करप्शन किया है, दरबार में जाएंगे पहले मंत्री से लेकर संतरी तक सबको पैसे खिलाएंगे. तो इट वॉज ईजियर फॉर इंडियंस टू ट्रेड विद ब्रिटिश. पोर्तुगीज इसमें सब कुछ नहीं किया, आके बमबारी शुरू, कन्वर्जन, वायलेंस, सर काटना. तो they created many adversaries, and unfortunately they came 1 century earlier also, because when they were rising at the very same time Mughals were also rising, and to Mughals ke sath takkar lena was not easy. So mighty Mughals, huge land power. So Portuguese, whenever they conquered southern area, coastal southern area, it was easy for them to do. You capture 𝐂𝐴 ka area, you go to some Pulicat, etc. But if you want to create a region in North India, in Gujarat and Bengal and North India, you have to follow the terms, you have to play by the rule. Because if you don't, Mughals will come and crush you. They did in 1630s. Mughals उनको खदेड़ दिया पूरा, जैसे रूल तोड़ दिया, खदेड़ दिया. So at that time Mughals were also ascending power. So Portuguese found it difficult to expand in North. They had to play by, if you play by a book, तो आपके पास तो कोई स्किल है ही नहीं. You don't have any technology or extra skill. You just have violence power. If violence is matched with counter violence, तो आप क्या कर लो? कुछ नहीं कर सकते. So it could subdue some petty powers on Malabar, but further expansion in India was not possible when at the same time mighty Mughals were rising in North India and there were strong kingdoms in Deccan as well. As their advance into hinterland was limited, the colonies were just fragmented pockets without any land connectivity. So you have logistical problems. You don't have a contiguous land. हर स्टेट में दो चार आपके एरिया है, छोटे छोटे. तो इवन इफ यू वांट टू गो फॉर इंटरनल कम्युनिकेशन, समुद्र में जाओ पहले फिर कम्युनिकेट करो. इट वाज नॉट दैट इजी. ऑल दिस फोर्स Portuguese to rely more on international trade rather than regional trade. I discussed this point also, that regional trade was the actual game, and that was cracked by Dutch. Inter-regional trade. Portuguese focused more on Asia, Euro-Asian trade, और वहां पे वो मारे गए. 100 साल के बाद वो चले नहीं. Administrative reasons, no unity of command. It was crown initiative. The king appointed courtiers and country nobles in the administration who had access to the king directly. This led to ill development of civilian bureaucracy with single point of command. दिल्ली में होता है, हमारे चाचा विधायक है, तुम नहीं जानते मेरा बाप कौन है. This thing happened Goa a lot, because Goa had its own governor. Then in Goa, the king appointed many of his people directly, and they would defy the governor because they had direct access to the king. जानता मैं कौन हूँ. तो it unity of command नहीं है. There are multiple parallel centers of power that emerged in Goa. It's not conducive for growth. ऐसे काम नहीं चलता. Social and religious reasons. The Portuguese adopted a bigoted religious policy to promote Christianity. Religious fanaticism was a millstone around the neck of Portuguese administration. The biggest problem the missionaries created was by religious persecution of Hindus and Muslims. For example, mixed marriage. Portuguese का record on the religious front is extremely bad. Extremely bad. Church formed an integral part of colonization. As I said yesterday, threefold agenda, 3G, God, glory and gold. So God comes first, gold comes later. For them, religious idea was more important. हमने देखा वास्को द गामा ऑन हिज सेकंड एक्सपेडिशन समुद्र से आ रहा है, 400 लोगों को भगा दिया उसने, इसे मार दिया, जला दिया, जिंदा जला दिया, विदाउट एनी प्रोवोकेशन, विदाउट एनी रीजन. द ओनली इशू इज मुसलमान है, मार दो उनको. दिस इज नॉट हाउ यू डू इट. इंडिया डिड नॉट हैव दैट ट्रेडिशन. सो व्हेन colonization happened, we have the crown and the church coming together, and they completely followed that policy. And it was a hangover. It was a hangover of Spanish Reconquista. As I said, the Spanish Iberian Peninsula itself was a Muslim peninsula till 15th century, and then it was conquered by Christians. Muslims were either ousted, Muslims and Jews both, and they were said कि आप सबको Christian बनना है. So with the royal command, under force and duress, all the Muslims of Spanish Peninsula were converted to Christianity, and they are called New Christians. So old Christians are more trustworthy because the original Christians, New Christians were either Muslims and Jews. They are suspicious people. भरोसा नहीं है, अंदर ही अंदर शायद जाके पूजा करता है, पता नहीं. So New Christians were put under suspicious lens forever, and to ensure they remain true Christians, उस समय they formed Spanish Inquisition, inquest करने के लिए Inquisition. इसका थोड़ा कॉन्टेक्स्ट आपको बता दूं. That there was Protestant Reformation we discussed in 15th 16th century with all this Martin Luther and everything, and it was against the Catholic Church. Catholic Church destroy तो नहीं हुआ, but उसका factions हो गए. The Catholic Church thought this is not good. I need to do something from my side. They started something called as Counter Reformation, and as a part of that Counter Reformation, they wanted to ensure that people are following Christianity very strictly, Catholicism very strictly, and secondly, we want to go to a far land and convert everybody to Catholicism. So as a part of that, they created two things. एक था inquest करने के लिए Spanish Inquisition, ताकि जो जो हमने forcefully convert किया है Christianity में, if any single practice गलती से भी वो follow कर रहा हो पुराने धर्म की, जला दो उसको. Literally, they used to burn people on stake. जिंदा जला के आंखें फोड़ देते थे. बोल क्या तू दोबारा मुस्लिम बन गया? नहीं, एक आंख फोड़ दी. बोल हुआ कि नहीं? अच्छा अब माना. दिस इज द वे. टॉर्चर के टेक्निक्स, इंक्वेस्ट, एंड because of that these people fled. When India was created, Indian Empire was created, Goa etc., these new Christians fled and came to India. A lot of them were Jews, and India had a tradition of welcoming all the people. So Jews भी India आ गए, and यहाँ आने के बाद they started following Judaism once again. No more Christianity. उनके पीछे पीछे वो इंक्वेस्ट भी इंडिया में आ गया. तो दे स्टार्टेड गोवा इंक्विजिशन, एंड यहाँ पे जो कोई क्रिश्चियन हुआ है वो क्रिश्चियनिटी कितना, मतलब यू अंडरस्टैंड. आई कम फ्रॉम महाराष्ट्र. इन महाराष्ट्र इन मेनी डिस्ट्रिक्ट्स यू गो, यू हैव सब मुस्लिम्स जो मंगलसूत्र पहनते हैं, एंड इट इज टेकन एज नॉर्मल, परंपरा है. व्हाई? बिकॉज वेन एवर पीपल कन्वर्ट, ये ऐसे बाइनरी नहीं होता आइदर यू आर हिंदू और मुस्लिम. ये तो ब्रिटिश आने के बाद हम समझना शुरू किया है कि आइदर यू आर हिंदू और मुस्लिम. लॉट्स ऑफ कम्युनिटीज इन इंडिया आर समवेयर इन बिटवीन. Some custom of this religion, some custom of that religion, and that is always true. It is all fuzziness, it's all grey, it's either white and black. तो ये होता था पहले, लेकिन एंड कन्वर्जन इज ऑलवेज अ ग्रेजुअल प्रोसेस. रातों रात बदलते नहीं आपका मन ऐसे, कभी कभी इस तरफ थोड़ा, कभी उस तरफ, चलता रहता है आपका, कोई दिक्कत नहीं है उसमें. दिस इज हाउ इंडियन सेक्युलरिज्म वर्कड इन द पास्ट. बट व्हेन द इंक्वेस्ट केम, दे स्टार्टेड टू से कि भाई ये नहीं चलेगा. तो इफ यू आर कन्वर्ट एंड इफ यू फॉलो एनी प्रैक्टिस, अ सिंगल प्रैक्टिस ऑफ प्रीवियस रिलीजन, आपको जिंदा जला देंगे. बहुत सारे उसका एक पूरा कोर्ट बैठता था. कोर्ट पे बिशप बैठता था, उनके लोग इन्वेस्टर्स बैठते थे, उनके जुबानी होती थी, विटनेस लेते थे, दैट इंटर प्रोसेस, एंड देन एट द एंड ऑफ इट दे यूज्ड टू गो फॉर पनिशमेंट. Anyway, the second thing that came out of that counter reformation, one was inquest, other thing is Jesuit order. So Jesuits became people who went to far land trying to convert people into Christianity. And one of the greatest one who came to India was Francis Xavier. So he was the one who came to Goa at that time to convert Christianity, and Goa became the headquarter of Christianity, spreading Christianity in entire Asia. From Goa, Goa was not only the administrative headquarter of Portuguese Empire, Goa was also the Asian headquarter of Jesuit order, through which जहाँ से मिशनरीज पूरे एशिया में गए, अफ्रीका में गए, चाइना में गए, सब जगह गए, जापान गए, convert people. So Francis Xavier was here for long time. He went to China, वहीं पे जाके मरा है, फिर उसका डेड बॉडी वापस आ गया था. So mixed marriages. Let us come to Portuguese policies. The Portuguese encouraged their sailors to marry native women. We have discussed. Albuquerque banned sati so that Portuguese settlers may marry them. They tried to create a mixed Indo-Portuguese Christian community which would remain loyal. Dutch never did that again. Dutch actually are on the other side. They distrusted Indians so much. इनसे क्या हम शादी करेंगे, उनकी मतलब उनकी औकात क्या है. That was their argument. So Dutch never married Indian. Dutch India में आने के बाद if they settle they would find some Portuguese woman to marry but not Indian woman. In British we have the Anglo-Indian community. So in the initial phase British were okay with mixed marriages, but by 1850s, especially after 1857, they became very racist. तो उन्होंने लीगली बैन कर दिया ऐसे मैरिज. तो न्यू एंग्लो इंडियन कम्युनिटी उसके बाद कम हो गई धीरे धीरे आफ्टर 1850s. Inducement. The Portuguese gave preference to Christians in employment. Moreover, only Christians were given the right to own the land. I had a friend from Vasai or Basai, which was a Portuguese factory there. तो मेरे बचपन की बात है, मैं छोटा था, 1990s की बात है. तो उस समय भी वहाँ पर उनके फुटबॉल क्लब्स थे लोकल. एक फुटबॉल क्लब में लोकल क्रिश्चियंस ज़्यादा नंबर में प्रेजेंट थे, तो और इनकी तरफ नॉन क्रिश्चियंस थे. तो उस फुटबॉल टीम में जिसमें क्रिश्चियन रह रहे थे उसको बोलते पाव वालों की टीम. पाव खाने वालों की टीम. पाव मतलब ब्रेड. तो आई कुड नॉट अंडरस्टैंड कि ये क्या है. आफ्टर मेनी इयर्स आई केम टू नो ब्रेड came to India as a food product of missionaries and Christians, not as Indians, not as Hindus or Muslims. So for many centuries, bread is associated with Christianity. तो पाव खाने वाले मतलब ब्रेड खाने वाले मतलब क्रिश्चियन लोग. तो ये लोकल भाषा में आज भी इस्तेमाल होता है वेस्टर्न कोस्ट पे, पाव वाले मतलब क्रिश्चियन. इट इज नॉट अ वेरी पॉजिटिव, इट्स नॉट अ पॉजिटिव टर्म टू यूज. डेरोगेटरी है तो वी डोंट यूज इट. बट इट व्हाई आई एम टेलिंग दिस, बिकॉज इंड्यूसमेंट टू कन्वर्जन, आई हैव हर्ड सच स्टोरीज इन गोवा एट दैट टाइम. अब ऐसे कस्टम लोग है कि भाई छुआछूत मानते हैं हिंदुइज्म में, तो क्रिश्चियन लोगों को पता चल गया. तो दे यूज टू कम, कोई कुआं है, कुएं में पानी है, गांव के लोग पानी भरते हैं, तो पाव आधा खाएंगे आधा कुएं में डाल देंगे, बोले कुआं धर्म तक, कुआं ही क्रिश्चियन बन गए आप. और जो कोई यहाँ से पानी पिएगा सब क्रिश्चियन. तो so such kind of tactics were used. Conversion is an interesting thing, but anyway, destruction of mosques and temples, including demolition of mosques, confiscation of temple wealth, burning sacred books, and imposing prohibition of religious ceremonies like public celebration में मना कर दिया. एक टेम्पल था सप्तकोटीश्वर टेम्पल, यू माइट नॉट हैव हर्ड ऑफ इट, उसको उन्होंने तोड़ दिया. देयर वाज अ रॉयल कमांड, 76 टेम्पल्स वर डिस्ट्रॉयड इन गोवा एट दैट टाइम. तो एक टेम्पल से एक मूर्ति शिवलिंग था, उसको भाग के लोग गोवा से बाहर आ गए. एंड एट दैट टाइम इन 1650s 1670s यू हैव शिवाजी. तो शिवाजी ने कहा अच्छा मैं भी बदला लूंगा इसका. तो ही वेंट ऑन गोवा बॉर्डर एंड जो मूर्ति चुरा के बाहर लाई थी वहां पर उसने मंदिर खड़ा कर दिया उसी मूर्ति के लिए. तब तो आज भी टेम्पल है वो, आपने मंदिर तोड़ा मैं मंदिर बनाऊंगा उसी मूर्ति पे. सो सच काइंड ऑफ रिलीजियस complexity is also there, but those things are always there, some bigotry, something, so we don't focus on that much, we focus on the economic aspect. ठीक है. And then forced convergence and tortures under Goa inquisitions, so those things are also there. Apart from the religious angle, there was also racist angle. So there was also an element of racism, as the natives were never recruited in the army, for they were considered incompetent and untrustworthy. And that also became a problem. British were able to create institutions to recruit Indians, train them and use them for their own purpose. But Portuguese did not trust on Indians, so they always remained dependent on manpower coming from Portugal. Portugal छोटा देश है, कितने लोग हैं वहाँ पे? So they could not expand beyond the point. In spite of their barbaric behavior, their Indian possessions could last for over a century because they enjoyed control over high seas and they did not have to face the might of the Mughal Empire, as South India was outside the Mughal influence. Finally, the Dutch and English exploited the situation and they came in the next centuries. So, what is the impact of Portuguese on India? अगर सवाल पूछे, एकदम summary में अगर बताया जाए, all the points are already covered except for one or two on agriculture. I will just put them again in a succinct form. The first thing is that armed trade. The Portuguese introduced the concept of armed trade in Indian Ocean. It was the precursor to conquest. That mere clausum, armed trade, trade with violence, is a new thing that came into Indian Ocean for the first time. The second, empire building. Not only were the Portuguese the earliest to arrive in India, but they were also the first to have the vision of creating an overseas empire in India. Clear? Third point, agriculture. This is an important point. The Portuguese introduced new varieties of crops such as mango, papaya, pineapple, guava, chili pepper, kidney beans, potato, tomato, groundnut, cashew nut, tobacco, maize, etc. These things did not exist in India before. These things did not exist in Asia before. These things did not exist in Asia, Africa, and Europe before. They came to India as a part of Columbian exchange. So when Columbus went to Americas, it was an isolated region for centuries and centuries, thousands of years. Evolution वहाँ पे थोड़ी अलग हुई थी और थोड़ी यहाँ पे अलग हुई थी. So there was transfer of such kind of biological goods. For example, from Europe वहाँ पे कई सारे diseases चले गए, या measles, you have pox. तो लाखों लोग तो ऐसे ही मर गए वहाँ पे because they don't have immunity. तो माया, एस्टेक वहाँ पे ऐसे ही खत्म हो गए. तो लाखों लोग literally मरे गए because the simple disease के लिए उनके पास immunity थी नहीं, because they were never exposed to this. सिमिलरली वहाँ से कुछ कमोडिटी यहाँ पे आती है. तो ये क्यों इंपॉर्टेंट है लिस्ट देखना. टोबैको यूपीएससी पूछती है हड़प्पा में इसमें से कौन से गुड्स थे, कमोडिटीज थे, एंड वन आंसर विल बी पोटैटो और टोबैको. काट दो वहीं पे यार. पोटैटो कैन नॉट बी इन हड़प्पा, पोटैटो कैन नॉट बी. दिल्ली सुल्तान को नहीं पता था ना, मुगलों के पहले किसी को नहीं पता था पोटैटो. इट नेवर केम टू इंडिया बिकॉज इट नेवर केम टू एशिया. इन यूरोप ऑल्सो पोटैटो जब आया पहली बार इन 16th सेंचुरी, उसको समझते थे ये खाद इंसान का नहीं, ये सुअरों का है. जो पिग फूड फॉर मेनी डिकेड. एंड ड्यूरिंग द फेमाइन पोटैटो कुड ग्रो इजीली. तो फ्रेंच रॉयल्टी हैड टू शो न्यू रेसिपीज टू पीपल, और खुद खा के जाते थे, दिखाते देखो मैं पोटैटो खा रहा हूँ, राजा होके भी आप भी खाओ. तो पोटैटो का प्रसार किया कि खाओ, इंसान के खाने लायक चीज है ये, वो सुअरों की नहीं है. तो और हमारे कहते जब तक रहेगा समोसे में आलू. सो samosa actually, if you read the culinary history, samosa was not with potato, it was Central Asian. मीट का समोसा मीट का ही होता है ओरिजिनल. संबूसा इंडिया में आने के बाद समोसा बाहर से आया, पोटैटो बाहर हमने जोड़ दिया. और आजकल तो उपास में पोटैटो खाते. उपास में कैसे हो सकता है पोटैटो. स्वीट पोटैटो बाहर से आया. इवन साबूदाना, इट इज ऑफ ट्रोपिया. तो ट्रोपिया बाहर से आता है. अब ये भी आया 300-400 साल पहले, था ही नहीं. Tobacco came to India after Columbian exchange. It was not there before. Tobacco is a good product. No, cigarette था पहले, क्या हुक्का होता था. तो टोबैको एक बचपन में हमें किसने श्लोक पढ़ाया था, तमाखु पत्रम राजेंद्रम भजमाद ज्ञानदायकम, तमाखु पत्रम राजेंद्रम भजमाद ज्ञानदायकम. तम आखु पत्रम एंड तमाखु पत्रम. वो संधि विग्रह के ऊपर एक जोक है वहां पे, उसमें वो छोड़ दो. बट पंडित संस्कृत में तमाखु अगर शब्द आ रहा है तो पीपल वुड एक्सपेक्ट कि भाई ये तो पुराना श्लोक है. टोबैको वॉज वेरी ओल्ड इन अवर लैंड. इट वॉज नो श्लोक नया हो सकता है यार, इट्स अ न्यू श्लोक. तो एनीवे, सो यू हैव दोस लाइक कैशू नट्स. आई हैव पुट एक मैंने खबर रखी, पीछे का पन्ना पलटो, है ना, गोवा कैशू इज गेटिंग जीआई टैग. इस साल की खबर है ये. उसमें एकदम लास्ट पैराग्राफ पढ़ो, उसका लास्ट पैराग्राफ. ठीक है. So you got the clarity. Cashew also came with Goa. तो आज गोवा cashew is very famous. Architecture, नहीं printing और हाँ, Christianity. The spread of Christianity started with the arrival of Portuguese. Saint Francis Xavier led an evangelical mission to India. Then printing press. Again, for the first time, printing press came to India to print Bibles in Goa. So the Portuguese introduced the printing press in India and printed copies of Bible in Malayalam and Kannada. Architecture. Portuguese built many churches and forts on the western coast of India, including the churches and convents of Goa, a UNESCO World Heritage Site, on which UPSC asked the question 2 साल पहले, right? Goan culture, which is an exquisite culture of cuisine and dance and music and everything. That also is the outcome of a mixed culture. If you've been to Goa, you will come to know आज भी differences है. The coastal and inner Goa, North Goa, South Goa. You can easily see the region where the Goan Portuguese culture is more prominent and region where it is not so prominent. Local politics आज भी चलता है वो. And this is some additional information, prelims fact. You cover that in medieval generally, but I am just adding it here for your. इसमें कोई बड़ा पढ़ाने की बात है नहीं. It's just a fact. कौन Portuguese visitors आए थे और क्या देखे, खत्म. This is the graph for chart for Columbian exchange, like maize, potato, sweet potato, beans, peanuts, squashes, pumpkin, etc. all came to India and vice versa. तो ये लिस्ट एक बार अच्छे से पढ़ के जाना एग्जाम से पहले. This is the news. With that, the Portuguese are over. Do you have any doubt with Portuguese? Yes. I did not get the question. No, no, these crops did not come from Portuguese. Portuguese were the conduits. These crops came from America. And before Columbus reached America, America was cut off from entire world. So look at the graph. Look at the map rather. These are North America, South America. So when Columbus reached there, only then this could come to Europe and Asia and Africa, not before that. So Columbian exchange is not exchange between India and West. It is actually exchange between the new world and the old world. This is the new world. America is new world and rest of the world is old world. उनके अंदर वो exchange हो रहा है. And India is a part of the old world. ठीक है.